Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. It's Friday. It's April the 24th. We got a bit of a late start trying to get all of our audio lined up, and it was on my end. It's my fault. Not on purpose, really, but we had a wrong link. And so I've got Steve Baker with me. We're going to be discussing pipe bomb, lawsuits, New York Times, discrediting piece, whatever we can get on record. And I want to do wave tops, overview, a lot of rapid fire information for people who don't have any background on what happened on January 5th of 2021, what's gone forward for the last couple of years, the status of the investigation prior to the identification of Shauni Kirkoff by the Blaze. And we're just going to get all into it. Okay, so we got a long list of things we're going to try to touch, and I've got some extra help to help me get along with that. So that's where we're going to go with today's program, and I hope you guys stick around. Make sure you guys have liked the show if you have not already. I think you will enjoy it. It'll be fun. It's always fun. And I'm going to try to figure out how to do Steve Friend as Friend and Baker, and I was already mixing it up as the show got started before we were online. So there you have it. That's where we're going, and let's get into a quick little read for one of our sponsors. We're going to be talking about Patriot Protect. Folks, the website is patriot-protect.com/KYLE. There's a link in today's show description as usual, patriot-protect.com/Kyle. For those of you that just finished doing your taxes, as exciting as that is, feeling how the government reaches into your pocket and pulls your money, they also take a bunch of data. And it turns out the federal government is probably one of the worst places to put your data, as I found out, Steve Friend found out, the OPM hacks of 2016. It doesn't matter where you put it, the government is probably going to lose track of your stuff, which means that scammers can get access to it. They can get your name and your phone number, sometimes your social security number, your email addresses, your family connections, and so on. And if you don't want that stuff floating around on the web, whether it be the white web that's out there where everybody can reach it, or the dark web where people are out there trading in all of your information, you might want to set up a service to be able to protect yourself. Patriot Protect is the one that me and my family use. This is what Emily and I and my parents and some of the other suspendables, George Hale has jumped in on it as well. It helps scrub you from at least the public easy stuff, and you can get as deep as you like with them. They have a deep web scraper. They have the search and destroy protocol that's out there, getting rid of the people search databases that are used for scammers to find you. It's how I find people on a regular basis, because most people are lazy and they're not willing to spend a couple of bucks. So get yourself squared away on that. If you have not done already, if you don't have someone that's keeping track of your data and trying to keep you protected, Patriot Protect's the one we recommend. Look in the show description. You'll use my name and get 15% off annual subscriptions. They have a couple of different styles. KYLE will save you that money. All right, we're going to get into today's program, and let's start it right now. I'll tell you what, nothing slips past our chat in the morning. So if you guys are just listeners on the audio end and you don't get to see the video, I had on my cans, which are kind of like my DJ style headphones. And I use those when I'm trying to configure things because I can just grab and put them on. The in-ears are the ones that are a little bit more comfortable for long term. So without any further ado, let me bring on the guest panel and welcome to the program, Steve Baker, who's sitting behind the gold curtain now, and Steve Friend. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm obviously at a Trump property right now with all the glow. I mean, surrounded by gold. So.
What is that? What's going on? Are you doing like a late night comedy show later on or something?
Yeah. In an undisclosed, secret location, bunker.
Sounds good. How about you? How are you doing, Steve?
Oh, I'm doing well, man. I'm actually relishing the knowledge that starting 12 minutes late probably cost our United States government, which is funding a certain lawsuit, about $360 because they bill by the hour just to watch your placeholder video.
Okay, fair enough. All
That's
right,
exactly right.
let's start at the beginning, Mr. Baker, if we can.
Yes.
Start with the events that took place, maybe a summary and timeline of January 5th and how we ended up talking about the so-called J6, but really J5 pipe bomber. Can you just break down the events, and I'll see what I can find for visuals on that.
God, do I do it in reverse or in chronological order? I mean, it's
let's do chronological.
It's been a wild ride.
So let's start with something happened roughly 7:30, January 5th, 2021. Yeah. Describe the events for people who don't know the story.
Yeah, at 7:34 p.m. on the evening of January 5th, 2021, there emerged onto Capitol CCTV a figure wearing a gray hoodie, gray pants, dark colored pants, glasses, a COVID mask, carrying a backpack. And then this person wandered around near and just south of the Capitol Hill area, south of the Capitol itself, around these facilities known as the Republican National Committee headquarters, the Democratic National Committee headquarters, the Congressional Black Caucus Institute, and then just the surrounding neighborhood. Wandering around, apparently doing a little bit of recon, probably the first couple of passes, and then ultimately this gray hoodied figure apparently dropped some sort of device, a suspicious device, which looks suspiciously like a training exercise pipe bomb, but behind a bench and right in front of a bush at the Democratic National Committee headquarters, then left there, did a couple of passes over by the Congressional Black Caucus, sat down at a bush at the Congressional Black Caucus Institute, looked like from the Capitol CCTV cameras, because it's at night, it's dark, it's blurry, but it looks like that the bomber tries to place something under that bush, then retrieves it, gets up from there, goes down a back alleyway, which doesn't exist anymore because there's been some construction there and a new building is where this alley was, and then emerged on the front side of the Democratic National Committee headquarters, and where this individual had already sat down several minutes before. Actually, I'm sorry, I apologize. This is when they went from this bush, they planted the device at the DNC, left there, and then went to the RNC. Had to get the chronological order correct.
Sure.
And so then went to the RNC, disappeared into an alleyway that's called Rumsey Court behind the Republican National Committee headquarters and the Capitol Hill Club, which is an adjacent Republican muckety muck hangout private club, and then found a place right behind the Capitol Hill Club to place the device right next to a trash bin and a rat trap. And so that's at least the photography that we have. And then exited through a secret gate, the full length of the alleyway behind from the RNC. And the secret gate goes into a Catholic church garden, completely pitch dark at night. There's no lighting in it whatsoever. And then disappears into the night. And that's basically what happened on the 5th. Then, everybody thinks they know what happened on the 6th. There was something big that happened over at the Ellipse near the White House. There was a gigantic rally that the President Trump spoke at. From there, people began to move back towards the Capitol, depending upon where you started. And by the tens of thousands before Trump left the stage, people were arriving at the Capitol. And at about, let's say 20 to 25 minutes before the gavel was to drop inside the joint session of Congress to ratify the Electoral College vote of Biden then being elected as president, that there was a suspicious device found at the RNC. And once this was found, the alerts went out. It required a number of Capitol Police officers to divert their coverage and attention from the property at the Capitol itself and go to the RNC, which is not that far away. It's only a couple of blocks. And but nevertheless, it diverted a lot of resources, very, very thin resources already that the Capitol Police had that day, diverted those to the RNC. Then, a few minutes later, became the first breach of the Capitol fencing outer perimeter, where only about a half a dozen uniformed officers, were protecting a barricade, a temporary, what they call bike rack barricade line from, at this point, the gathering of hundreds of protesters, including the famous scene where the infamous Ray Epps leans down, whispers in Ryan Samsel's ear. Ryan Samsel, 2 seconds later, turns around and charges that barricade, knocking Officer Carolyn Edwards over, concussing her on a brick, or a concrete step, and first blood was drawn that day in terms of the beginning of the battle.
Okay,
That was only 10 minutes before there.
Yep. So I want to try to hit high points just for people's awareness. Steve did that from memory. His awareness, his read in on this, and Mr. Baker's sort of familiarity with these events is, I mean, there may be others who know it, but he's dialed in. He's a professional, and this was his beat. How long did you cover J6 as a professional journalist, shall we say?
Now we're getting close to 5.5 years, aren't we?
All right, I think so. You were there the day of. You were in the building, walking around. You've been arrested by the FBI for this. You've got no special love for the government's case, one way or another, I think. So I just wanted to establish some bona fides on that. For people who don't know, Steve Baker, independent journalist at Steve Baker USA. Follow him on X and their new project at Veritas Regnum. Okay, so that being the case, on that day, do we know where Shauni Kirkoff was? Where did she live? What did she do for a living? And how did she get introduced into the scene? I'm going to do the same thing with Brian Cole Jr. so we can talk about the players in the story, and then we'll keep moving forward.
Yeah, well, we didn't know anything about Shauni Kirkoff at the time whatsoever. But as I was saying, right at 1 o'clock, the gavel drops inside the House of Representative Joint Section of Congress there by then Vice President Mike Pence. And then 5 minutes later, the RNC bomb is found. So the two pipe bomb devices are found within minutes of either side of the gavel drop, once again reducing the resources at the Capitol that the Capitol Police had. But what we didn't know is that there were a team, a squad rather, of what they call less lethal officers. One of them was a training officer in less lethal munitions and use of those weapons. And as the crowd then began to surge toward the lower west terrace of the Capitol building, and this is while the session in Congress is going on and while the president is still on the stage speaking at the ellipse, these officers then began firing into the crowd. And one of those officers, we later learned, 4.5 years later, is named Shauni Ray Kirkoff. She was probably had been with the Capitol Police at this point, 2.5, 3 years, something of that nature. She had ascended very quickly, had become a training officer in less lethal. And then fast forward, Kyle, 4.5 years later, Joe Hanneman, my partner, while we were still at the Blaze at the time, were working on a story unrelated even to the less lethal, but the less lethal use of those munitions, what by experts describe as criminally negligent and potentially lethal use of less lethal munitions on the crowd, caught our attention. And we started really honing in on that and developing a story. That's where we learned the name of not just Shauni Kirkoff, but all of the officers that were firing from the precipice, the exact spot where they swear in a new president every 4 years.
Perfect. Friend, can you discuss less than lethal or less lethal, depending on what department you're in, any training you have with that, and then why it can be used in a way that's inappropriate?
Yeah, well, you have to go through the force continuum anytime you're dealing with law enforcement, right? If you're think about it as the context of a uniformed police officer who interacts with somebody on the street, you can't just walk up to somebody and smoke them in the face for no reason. There has to be an elevation and escalation in what their actions are against you, and you're allowed to use one level above that. So if I go up to somebody, hey, let me see your hands, and they comply, we're good here. If there is going to be some passive resistance, I might be able to put my hands on them. If they're actively resisting me, like fighting me, I can not only fight back, I can use some intermediate, less lethal weapons that might be at my disposal. My bat belt could be in the form of OC spray, an ASP baton, a taser, those sorts of. And then ultimately you get to the highest level of threshold, and that's when there's an imminent threat of death or serious injury. That's deadly force. That's when you can go to the handgun and take the shot necessary to end the threat, not kill, end the threat. So being certified in firing a pepper ball, that's a less lethal situation. That's when there's not an imminent threat of death or serious injury, but we're getting towards that. Now, you can use a less lethal tool, a less lethal weapon in a manner that is deadly force. And that applies to really anything, right? If you have a a lock that goes on a door, you can put that lock in a sock and swing it and hit somebody in the head and kill them. Would you think that the lock is a deadly weapon? Well, no. And the same thing applies for a pepper ball. If you take the shot and you hit somebody at the head, that's using that tool in the form that is deadly force because it can turn the lights out permanently. You're supposed to be using that in a body shot where it's less likely to actually end their life.
All right, so you've got an asp or a baton. You're using it on hands. You're using it on arms. You're using it on legs. That's less than lethal. You decide to use it above the shoulders. Now you're neck and heads. That's potentially lethal. You're using a pepper ball. You're shooting at the legs. You're shooting at the body. That's theoretically acceptable depending on the type of training. Some people say below the waist only. You start moving it above the waist. You start having the potential of bodily injury to internal organs, throat, face, etc. It gets uglier. So we can take this less than lethal tool and use it in a way that's inappropriate. That drew your attention. Is that accurate, Steve Baker?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what especially drew our attention was the close range nature of where these shots were being fired into the crowd. At this point, the Capitol Police had not yet set up another bike rack barricade. They were still in the process of establishing a perimeter, a defensive perimeter there on the lower West Terrace. And so they were leaning over, and they did get a command. They did receive a command from a Capitol Police commander. I believe it was inspector level that said launch, 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 and they began firing into the crowd. But at the range in which they were firing these weapons, and look, these are not weapons that are accurate to 100 yards or 50 yards or even 25 yards, but we're talking about less than 10 yards away. They're very accurate, and yet they were still hitting people not only in the face and the head, but they were also hitting their own officers. We can see pepper ball pellets exploding off the back helmets of their own officers on that front line.
Was there any testimony that ever came forward from any of the officers that were on that parapet or that the landing where they were firing from? Did any of them ever testify under oath? And if so, what did they testify about and why?
Well, we know that Shauni Kirkoff testified in 2 trials. In fact, she testified in I think she was the actual very first witness in the very first January 6th trial. It was a defendant by the name of Guy Reffitt from Texas. He had some rather questionable conduct that day, and so they were going to make a big example of him, and it was a big show trial. And she had a very close encounter with Guy Reffitt, not from the Upper West Terrace, but after the line broke through and protesters were ascending a stairway next to the big, large scaffolding that they had set up for the coming inauguration. Guy Reffitt was basically leading a charge and verbally calling the crowd to advance and attack. And she comes around the corner and sees him, and by her own testimony, she hit him in the chest 40 to 50 times with pepper balls, and they wouldn't stop him. Now, he was either wearing very thick winter clothes or had maybe body armor on underneath it, but 40 to 50 we're talking about point blank range. We're talking about 10, 15 feet. She hit him 40 to 50 times, and he would not stop. Then one of her partners hit him with an FN 303, which is much more painful weapon. He still wouldn't stop, and he continued to advance. And so they finally pulled out one of those big bear spray tanks and hit him with that, and he finally buckled and stopped under that. But he continued to wave the crowd up. But what we learned from her testimony in that trial was we learned that she was still a U.S. federal government employee, although she did not name who she was employed with, and that she had applied for that job before January 6th, and that she had taken that job about 6 months after January 6th. We also learned from the trial transcript that we have a copy of, is that the judge admonished under what they call a sidebar. That's a sidebar is where in the federal courthouse there in D.C., they fill the courtroom with white noise so that the jury, the gallery, the assembled press cannot hear what's going on. But the judge can speak to the attorneys and defendants through telephones. And what he did is he admonished both the prosecution and the defense team to not talk about certain aspects related to this particular witness that were under seal. And then when he went back to sidebar before the cross-examination of the defense team, then it got really interesting. He said, "Don't you go waving Miss Kerkhoff's 302s around the courtroom."
Nice.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. So there were serious red flags went off, things that I needed to know at that point as an investigative journalist about her that seemed to me to be more curious and went beyond the fact that she was a person firing less lethal launchers, as they like to use. They don't like to say weapon, but launchers from that parapet into the crowd.
Let me go to a friend for a second. You had a couple of smirks. What were you smirking about, Steve?
I'm just imagining the level of PCP and cocaine that we were required to absorb 50 rounds to the chest. And also kind of strange credulity that she was able to pop off 50 rounds in the course of him traveling 15 feet. Maybe a little bit hyperbolic, but I can confirm Baker's point there also about the white noise. That's universal. I mean, I've been in district courts in Nebraska, in Florida, and anytime the judge needs to speak sort of in private, but on the record, because that's all being recorded, the transcript is available later on. They pump that noise into the room so that nobody else knows what's going on at that time, though.
What circumstances would cause that to be the case, friend, in your trial experience?
The judge does not want the argument to be in front of the jury because it's going to be over an issue whether or not they want the jury to be aware of it. So for all the misconceptions that people have that we have this perfect system of justice and you go into a court and all the facts will be borne out and the jury will weigh all of the relevant information. Well, that is filtered through the judge. The judge has enormous power. So in this case, for Ms. Kerkhoff, the judge did not want certain information in the hands of the jury when they were evaluating it. And we can only ascertain subsequently that her employment was necessary for that.
Okay, so her employment was with the CIA, we found out later. And of course, of this last week, she's given an on-the-record interview as a CIA employee with the New York Times, which is, as far as we know, unprecedented. Steve, what other, friend, federal informants, would they be subject to this kind of, sort of protection from the judge? Or are there other examples you can think of, witnesses that were in a compromised position maybe? I'm just trying to go through the kind of list.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you once where I was dealing with a domestic violence situation, and it was kind of a head scratcher because it was a habitual offender, which means strike three. You've got 2 prior convictions for domestic violence. And the judge was adamant that although the statute said that the prior convictions were necessary, and the defense was stipulating, saying like, all right, we're not going to contest that he's got prior convictions for that. The judge did not want us to say that the defendant at the table there has beat up this woman 2 times before and been arrested for it, because that could taint the jury, because the jury would say, well, he's done it before, so he could do it again. They just wanted to weigh the facts on this particular incident. So that was a sidebar.
Okay. Steve Baker, at that point, going into the Guy Reffitt trial, had you ever had any personal experience with Shauni Kirkoff?
No, the Guy Reffitt trial was in the summer of 22. July, I think, is when it began in 2022. So a year and a half after January 6th was the very first of all the trials that were to follow thereafter. So no, I had no knowledge of who she was, what she was at all at the time. It wasn't until, as I said before, until we get into the late summer, early fall of last year, 2025, that we identified Shauni Ray Kirkoff.
Okay. And to this point, as of today, have you ever met her face to face?
No, I have never met her face to face.
Ever spoken to her?
I have never spoken to her. That's a big criticism, by the way.
Yeah. How about Brian Cole Jr.? Have you ever spoken to him?
I have not spoken to Brian Cole, but I have seen him, and I've spoken to several of his family members and his attorneys.
All right. Would it be fair to say that there's been a ton of speculation about this case prior to October of 2025? A lot of people had a lot of theories on it, none of which panned out, and it essentially left kind of a void that the only people I'm aware of that filled in were members of Congress. Is there, outside of like the journalistic speculation, Revolver, Julie Kelly, you, maybe a couple of others kind of talking about it, was there any official word from anybody about progress in this case?
No, there was no official word whatsoever. In fact, out of desperation, because the president had himself earmarked the solving of the January 6th pipe bomb bomber case as one of his top 3 priorities from the Kash Patel FBI regime. That they made a big deal about that. They would mention it in their early press conferences. They did a sit down. Both Kash and Daniel sat down with Maria Bartiromo, whichever one it is. Anyway, so they sat down with her. They listed it not only in their top 3 priorities from the president, but they listed it as their number 1 priority. So by the time you get to the beginning of the fall of 25, they still had no progress whatsoever. And kind of in a desperation move, they released yet another video to the public through social media with a little bit, just a little bit more video of the gray hooded bomber. And they re-upped the $500,000 reward and said, and made an appeal to the public that maybe you might recognize something about the bomber's gait, about the bomber's disposition, whatever that would be, that would help us find out who this person is. And ironically, that new video was released only weeks before maybe not very many weeks, only a couple of weeks actually, before we identified who we think is the prime suspect.
All right, so a couple of key things that have been shared, at least by official sources, members of Congress, et cetera. There was a report by Barry Loudermilk and committee that included Tom Massey. Who else is on that, by the way?
Well, it depends on which committee you're talking about. If you're talking about the most recent January 6th Select Subcommittee, that is chaired by Barry Loudermilk. Now Massey is not on that committee. He's on House Judiciary, which is the prime committee above the Select, because the Select Committee that Loudermilk chairs is a subcommittee of Judiciary.
Got it. And they're the ones that put out the January 2025 kind of update, like where we stand 4 years later kind of deal?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And so in there's a couple of really interesting things. Number one, the word unclear is listed like 13 or 14 times. You guys can go to my social media and see that. I think it's relevant. I think it's interesting. They use that fairly frequently. They discuss that they actually honed in on an individual based on his gait and his walk and ownership of a very specific pair of shoes who worked at a gym. And that sort of fell through. They were able to kind of clear him, I guess, as well. They talked about the hundreds of thousands of pieces of evidence or, receipts they were combing through and who bought what when and how many of them there were. And it's some crazy voluminous amount. They also mentioned 51 phone numbers, which were gathered out of like the 180 something phone numbers in the area that pinged off cell phone towers. And 51 of them were law enforcement and they were ignored. And that's a critical piece that I think you and I have honed in on. I think people who have paid attention and said, hey, well, if you ignored the government's actions that day, then you wouldn't be able to find out if the government was involved in any way, shape, or form. And as far as I can tell, those quote unquote law enforcement phone numbers would have probably been on FirstNet. Is that the ongoing sort of belief, Baker?
Yeah, that's exactly what we surmise from the congressional report. And by the way, the congressional report that you're referring to, now that I understand which one report you're referring to, was the previous select committee, also chaired by Loudermilk, which was then under House administration. So anyway, he's chaired 2 different committees related to January 6th, depending upon the first one was under the McCarthy-Johnson regime, and then this new one was under the new Congress under Johnson. So but that report reported that 186 cell phone numbers were identified in the area being used at that time. Now think about that. That's a ridiculously low number for such a location in DC. But it was COVID lockdown era. It was a Tuesday night. It was cold. There's nobody out moving around. Nobody's going to dinner anywhere because DC was horrifically locked down under the COVID regime. And so people were at home watching television. Nobody's using their phones. And out of the 186, almost a full third of those, 51 of those phone numbers were attached to law enforcement who were obviously still having to work that night and were still moving in and out of the area. And the FBI chose not to investigate any of those phone numbers.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to throw a video on the background here. 1 second. I've got the screenshot from there. I was kind of digging in. I'm digging around for assets that I've got hanging in my file, just as for folks know. I produced this thing live, so we're doing this on the fly, and I'm kind of following the conversation and seeing what sort of things I can show you. But I did want to show this 186 phone numbers, as you said, gathered by early February of 2021 from this report. They did geofence, they did cell tower dumps, and then interestingly, it says that there are 51 law enforcement phone numbers, and then they needed no further action. What do you think about that? I mean, how about friend? You ever been on a search for somebody, done tower dumps, gotten some people in the area, and then just decided that some were eliminated because they don't matter to you?
No, but at the same time, I don't think that's an unfair original thesis to work off of, to say, well, surely the only person who dropped a weapon of mass destruction on that day in question, they're probably not wearing a badge. But if you strike out consistently over a period of half a decade, maybe you need to change some of your assumptions going in and rethink the strategy. And that was sort of the assurance that we got. We're going to go back through all the evidence because we didn't get any new evidence. We're just going to look at it with a different eye, a fresh set of eyes. And I guess you also need the motivation of the former co-deputy director, Daniel Bongino, saying, you're going to get me this guy. And I guess at that point, they still went off the assumption that it couldn't be law enforcement. I think that's a flaw.
Baker, when you look back over the time, can you talk about any number of people, right-wing media, people who are maybe in government at this point in time or previously have been in government, do you have a list in your head of people that believed that the federal government was involved in cover-up, that they somehow had something to do with whatever happened on that day, and have either changed positions or are curiously silent? Do you have a list of that on the top of your head?
I mean, on the top of my head, I know which which congressional members were most curious about January 6th. Now, I should say before I even start on a list is that if the truth be known, most even GOP congressional members would like to completely forget that January 6th ever happened and never go forward with any investigation whatsoever. And in fact, the two biggest obstructionists against Loudermilk's two committees and his efforts to get to the bottom of January 6th and learn as much as we possibly can have been Speaker Mike Johnson and Chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan. That's an uncomfortable truth, but it is an absolute truth. And then we have, of course, we have Loudermilk. We have Thomas Massey, who had a particular interest in the pipe bomb itself, even though he was never on one of those two investigative committees. He had a particular interest. So, it folds right into his MIT engineering, background, the scientific
just nerd
side.
Interest, is that fair?
Nerd interest, the probabilities, the device itself, its manufacturer, and then of course then the calculations. As I said, as he explained to me in an interview that I did with him back last year for the Matt Kibbe show, is that he had the option at MIT to either study in his math class statistics or probabilities, and he found probabilities much more interesting than statistics. And then makes the pipe bomb story very, very fascinating to him. So he was involved. And then you had over on the Senate side, we always had really good support investigating January 6th from Senator Ron Johnson in particular. Grassley was another one. Jumping back over to the House side, there's been several guys on the periphery that have done, showed interest because they're law enforcement. Troy Nels from Texas, and then of course Higgins from Louisiana, both being former law enforcement. So they have shown keen interest in January 6th as well, and particularly as it relates to law enforcement involvement.
Okay, what about Kash Patel had some thoughts on it? Do you know specifically if he thought that this was like a federal cover-up of some kind? I'm not sure I have that clip, so I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, well, we know beyond any shadow of a doubt that both Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, before going to the FBI and becoming FBI employees, both considered this to be a government setup, and that in fact there were elements of law enforcement involved in that.
Okay, and that was actually brought up in the New York Times piece, the quote-unquote Fedsurrection. Steve Friend, you look like you have a thought, and then if not, would you comment on what's on the screen there? Maybe I'll have you read it for me.
Well, my thought is about Mike Johnson, the hero of the Republic, who is the Smithers of our elected officials. When are we getting, Baker, access to all the J6 surveillance video footage that he promised us? What was that, 2 years ago?
Yeah, and they look. everybody always talks about the 40,000, 41,000 hours worth of video. I would estimate that there has been about 25,000 hours worth of video that has been uploaded by the committee to a Rumble channel. It is there. We do not have all of the 41,000, but the 41,000 is a mistake as well, because by the time you add in January 5th, which includes the movements of the pipe bomber and other suspicious characters on the evening of the 5th, you're talking about well over 60, 75,000 hours worth of available video from 1,800 cameras. So they're a long way away from making that all available. And then also, because of the more recent efforts at obstructionism, it has been very, very difficult for us to request video clips that we want. There have been new cameras actually added, not to the Rumble channel. There have been new cameras that we never knew about from Capitol Police that have recently been uploaded into the hard drive that's made available for January 6th review. And while we have specifically requested the footage and certain timestamps from those new cameras, which are absolutely germane to the pipe bomb investigation, we have not been able to get those.
I guess it's going through the same approval process as Epstein transparency.
Got to take our time. These things, they can't be rushed. There's a name that I haven't heard in a little bit, but I was just seeing this on here, Massey and D'Antuono. Do you want to quickly kind of brief that piece? Because I just think that's funny that he's sort of managed to escape out. I expect to one day hear from him more.
So this is a transcript. So Thomas Massey says, former FBI Assistant Director Christopher Swecker said the Bureau sometimes withholds or circulates incorrect information to protect an investigation, though he didn't know whether that was the case in the pipe bombs. Was that the case? Did you circulate any information that's not correct? And Stephen D'Antuono replied, oh, God, no. No, I would never do that. This is the guy who was in charge of the Whitmer investigation. Oh, why? So I know Chris. I don't know why he's making comments like that when he doesn't know anything about the case. Those are dangerous comments to be had anyway. So he never called me and asked me my opinion, but I never released anything that was not truthful, or we could never release disinformation.
What do you think about that, Baker?
Well, I don't think anybody is without doubt about my opinions about any FBI spokesman, whether we're talking about the old regime or the new regime. I don't believe anything that is ever said by the intel community in a public forum, particularly a congressional setting. Even the CIA famously admits that they regularly lie to Congress in those congressional hearings and the skiffs when they are deposed by them. There's no doubt that the FBI regularly does that as well. And the only thing that's slightly different from D'Antuono's response here than the typical FBI response is I'm not going to talk about an ongoing investigation.
Mm-hmm. That is a little bit different. I'm just going to show this. They released some footage that I think is exact evidence of the opposite of what he just said, whether it be disinformation or bad information on purpose, but they degraded the footage. We know that for a fact. They changed the aspect ratio and the frame rate, etc., because there is better footage from these cameras and then the stuff they put out to the public to ID this person, including by GAIT, by the way, which is a big deal. They somehow managed to give only degraded footage to the public. I'm assuming you have a theory on that. Why do you think that is?
Well, if you're talking to me, the theory is very, very specific, and I think that it demands better review. So let's start with the fact that, according to Congress, this release that you've referenced earlier, the FBI has told the Congressional Committee and their investigators that they have 30,000 video files of the pipe bomber. Mm-hmm. 30,000 video files. And they've released...
Not of all January 6th. That's specific to this particular investigation.
30,000 files related to this investigation. Mm-hmm. Yet they have only released a few seconds of that video. And they chose to release either from cameras that let's pretend that they did not nefariously go in and alter the frame rates and the aspect ratios, but that they received those DNC footage where it looks like a claymation, stop action cartoon figure walking down the sidewalk. Assuming that that's how they received the video, then why have they not released the much more clear, high definition of all of the ring cams that the hooded bomber walked past, the security cameras from the hotels and businesses that the hooded bomber? Now, we know all of this footage exists, not only because they said they have 30,000 files, but now that discovery is coming in the Brian Cole case, we're able to see a list of the cameras that are available to the defense team in Discovery. Now, we can't see those cameras. I have no access to that. And of course, the defense teams cannot give us access to that because they're under the court's protective order at this point. But as any of that is ultimately entered into evidence, then the public will be able to see it.
Okay. And the map is on the screen. Just so people can tell, you've walked this entire route numerous times, as I understand it. There are cameras here that are non-governmental, correct?
Hundreds.
And they would have gone out and got it. We'll get into the days after, because I think that's going to be relevant to the story that you guys are out and whatever my role was, which has been alleged to be a couple things that I don't think are accurate. Give me just a moment here to plug the channel for those that are listening. Guys, if you're listening on Rumble and you want to give us a thumbs up, I'd appreciate it. Same thing over on YouTube. That boosts the channel and the algorithm. Drop us a comment on things that you're seeing that you didn't know before or things that you want to know about. And if we haven't addressed it, we'll figure it out later. So do all those things. I'd appreciate it. You may hear an ad from the folks on Spotify. If you're listening on audio, you can drop a comment on Spotify. It's KyleSeraphinShow.com to get there. If you haven't done it, we got video and audio, which is a great way to be able to dance between it if you're a driver and you want to somehow see certain things that we put on the screen. So we appreciate that. Also, let me just do a quick little plug for my friends over at Cove Pure. Appreciate them sponsoring our program. And listen, if you're not drinking pure water, you're drinking probably garbage. If you're in my case, you're drinking a bunch of sulfur, which is basically like broccoli water. There's 176 million Americans that are drinking tap water right now with PFAs. They're man-made chemicals that last forever in food packaging. That is not a thing that's generally on Kyle Seraphin's radar, but that is on Mrs. Seraphin's radar. That is my wife's favorite thing. She thinks we're all being poisoned, and she thinks that we're being covered in parasites. So if you guys are not wanting to have things that are like firefighting foams and nonstick, cookware runoff and all kinds of other forever chemicals that stick in your body, you might want to have something that filters it out. For me, it's all about taste, and I do not like water that tastes like broccoli water. Makes me want to puke. That's what happens in the area that we live. They just have a hugely high sulfur content to the point it comes out yellow. My kids don't like drinking it, which means they end up dehydrated. None of that's great. So we have a Cove Pure upstairs for them. It's push button. It allows you to have various different settings for size, which is helpful when you have 2-year-olds that push the button. It also gives you different temperatures, so you can go from hot to cold to boiling if you want to do instant coffee, things like that. And then most importantly, it has reverse osmosis that pulls out 99.9% of contaminants. It's covepure.com/KYLE, covepure.com/KYLE, covepure.com/Kyle. There's a link in today's show description on there as well. So check them out if you have not done so already. If you guys have water that doesn't taste awesome or neutral at the very minimum, and the upside for those of you that are Trump supporters, you can see that there actually is a setting on there that lets you know the pure total dissolved solids, also known as TDS, and the raw total dissolved solids, also known as TDS. Mine frequently are in the 800 and 900 range, which basically maxes out the sensor. You're going to save $250 off their ticket price right now. So check them out in the link there, and we'll get back into this discussion. Gentlemen, there's the map. There's the walking route, which is in contention. There's some other kind of fun things that happen as well. And Steve Friend, weigh in on the competency, generally speaking, of the FBI, despite our differences with the agency. Do we have an organization in the FBI that basically is unable to identify human beings when big resources are pushed toward it?
No, they're completely competent in that regard. And even they don't have to be super cops or magic police. They can just throw a whole bunch of manpower and resources at something and just overwhelm the problem, which is why you show up to a search warrant with 50 people when really 5 would have sufficed. But that way you can assign very limited amount of work to all of those people, and it can be done relatively quickly. Same thing would go here for some sort of a manhunt. Steve was talking about the massive quantity of files that are available. It's not one person at a computer terminal that's responsible for watching all of that. I mean, theoretically, they can engage 38,000 people and have that thing watched in a day. So the just sheer volume of people and people who are, I mean, above average intelligence for the most part. I mean, they're on the right side of the IQ bell curve. They're capable of doing this.
How long would you think, Friend, it would take from a ground zero, dead stop, had no information prior, how long would it take for the FBI to identify an unknown subject in most cases, with unlimited resources being applied towards the situation, and consider it like a national priority case?
National priority, and in an area that's not remote, like you're not dealing with a Nancy Guthrie level of mystery that went on there.
That wasn't, listen, it was both dark and deserted in the desolate desert.
Yes.
Okay, and other alliterative ways of describing it as well.
For something that involves this level of security and a breach and a violation, a weapon of mass destruction in the national capital region where there's lots of cameras and ability to monitor, I would think 1 to 2 weeks would be sufficient for them to identify a person of interest here and then mobilize and start the process. And they wouldn't necessarily come out and be like, we've identified a person of interest, unless they're Kash Patel. They would actually start the other parts of the investigative process. They'd send out subpoenas for bank records or cell phones, or they put surveillance on somebody. And this would be stood up within 2 weeks.
Okay. Nobody believes you. We only believe people that come from positions of extreme authority that have held the position for 292 days. So let's hear what former co-deputy director of the FBI, Daniel Bongino, thought about that prior to being co-deputy director of the FBI.
Yeah, Kyle, I've noticed you've been commenting extensively on podcasts and on your social media. I've been following it religiously, and you've had some great ideas on this. And you've kind of become a threat. I've noticed D'Antuono and others seem to be kind of downplaying your knowledge of this kind of criminal investigation into terrorism, and it may be an effort to make you go away. I can only assume. But the FBI, it still has a lot of decent people who work there. I mean, the leadership is a mess, and there are certainly a lot of people there who need to go. But they're not incompetent. I mean, I've dealt with them a lot. So they've got this device that was found in front of the DNC. It looks to me, it appears to be a training device. It's got a rudimentary egg timer, wires, and a pipe. I mean, it looks to me like something you get on Amazon. If you were to put in Amazon, like, give me a fake bomb, like that would be it. How is it that the FBI you worked, which has a very, very good lab, couldn't pull DNA? Where's the video of them dropping a bomb? I mean, there's no way they're this incompetent.
I totally agree. There's no way they're this incompetent unless they chose to be this incompetent.
Oh, weird. Gentlemen, that was from February of 2024. That was before that Loudermilk report came out summarizing the kind of case as it stood. It was a year prior to that. What do you make of that, Mr. Baker?
Well, if we're talking about what I make of Bongino's discussion there, you remember in February 24, there's also a video available from his podcast where he is effusively praising me and saying, that guy Baker, he's just knocking it out of the park, time after time after time on the pipe bomb investigation. Fast forward to the fall, winter of 25, and he tells Congressman Massey that he wants to personally write a check to fund the defamation lawsuit of my coverage and my pointing out that Shauni Kirkoff might be the bomber.
I think I have that clip. I just typed in Daniel praises Baker. I think that's what this is. So let's just see if that's what this is.
You know, I was highlighting a reporter at the Blaze over the past few weeks. His name is Steve Baker. He's been ripping the covers off this January 6 bomber case with Kamala Harris. A lot of the videos I've showed you about the infamous bombing case that nobody wants to talk about, but Steve Baker, Julie Kelly, Darren Beatty, and a few others. Folks, Steve Baker has been now arrested by the FBI. Jim's shaking his head because it's almost hard to believe how much of a police state we live in right now. They used to hide this stuff and disguise it. They don't even hide it, disguise it, or even deny it anymore. Steve Baker is a journalist at the Blaze. He is clearly yet another political prisoner in the state. He was locked up today by the FBI, and I suspect it has a lot to do with the fact that he was exposing the fake bomb plot on January 6th to take out Kamala Harris at the DNC. Go to his Twitter profile and take a look. You'll be disgusted.
Yeah, that's the one. I remember that guy.
I'll go with that one.
Yeah, he was pumping the police state pretty hard right then. Why was that, Steve Friend?
You key down on that. That's why we're friends. I think he was the producer of a film called Police State that you and I had an opportunity to assist on and be on camera for. We both have IMDb pages now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I remember that. So he was pumping a movie and recognizing that the police state tends to arrest people that out their narrative. Baker, looking back at that kind of progress and that change and where we ended up, what do you think? What are your reflections just hearing that again? Plus, he was talking about you being arrested, which we should talk about briefly.
Yeah, well, my thoughts on that were, of course, goes back to the whole story arc and all of our relationships to Dan Bongino. Look, essentially, all of us were in good stead with Bongino, the podcaster, up until the Mar-a-Lago raid of Trump's property there by the FBI, and every one of us took a little bit of a counter position to the narrative that Julie Kelly put out there, that this was a assassination attempt. Bongino jumped on that. Steve Bannon jumped on that. That this was a planned effort in order to take out the president. Of course, she and others neglected to point out that he was actually in New Jersey at the time of the raid. They neglected to point out that in the actual warrant that the FBI had already been working with the Secret Service, and very reluctantly, like, oh crap, we got to go through this, we got to do it. But it was this pre-printed use of force language in the paperwork that Julie went apoplectic over and said that it was proof that there was an assassination attempt of the president or the former president at the time, and that they stuck to their narrative. And you guys, the suspendables, myself as an honorary suspendable and as a journalist, we pointed that out, and Bongino has hated us ever since.
Yeah, that's about right. So that was fun. That was a good time. I just wanted to kind of walk down that memory lane. Let's go to the writing of the story. You identified the woman based on, you identified a potential person that met some of the categories as you were doing this less than lethal force thing. What time period was that specifically?
When we made the identification, it was late September, early October of last year.
Okay.
It was in that
were you
time
mad at her,
frame
by
when
the
we
way?
were developing. I'm sorry?
Were you mad at her? Did you have any sort of like animus towards this person that you ID'd?
No, none whatsoever. I mean, it was just from my standpoint, it was just cold-blooded reporting. I mean, I didn't care either way. I mean, at first, as I mentioned earlier on this podcast right here, we first identified her as one of the less lethal officers firing into the January 6th crowd. And that was the point of our story, was to show how they were using these weapons in a criminally negligent way. And she was one of those doing so. I had no background on her. I had no animus towards her whatsoever. Now, I've since learned a lot about her. And one of the most interesting aspects of this, and this is something that in the New York Times story earlier this week, that after I spent 2 hours in total over 2 interviews with the New York Times reporter, one of the things that she was absolutely confounded by, and I'm talking about the reporter, was my reporting to her that everybody at the Capitol Police loves the hell out of Shauni Kirkoff. She was an exemplary cop up until, she started firing into people's heads and faces with that weapon. But all of her coworkers loved the hell out of her. They thought she was a great cop. And I'm talking about from commanders level, her commanders, all the way down to the, squad level with the CDU who she served with on a daily basis. They thought she was a great cop and a great person and thought she was a great friend.
Why was that confounding to the New York Times?
Because they thought I had pulled this story out of my ass and that I just found somebody randomly to accuse of being the pipe bomber, and that I must obviously, maybe I hated this person. Maybe I hated this person because she looks like a butch lesbian, although she has a boyfriend, so, whatever.
Yeah, I know.
But maybe that's it. I had some animus against her personally.
Clearly, what America heard from Steve Baker is that he dislikes 5'7" women with dude haircuts who run very unimpressive marathon times. That's why he construed this entire conspiracy.
That's it, pretty much.
I don't know what to make of any of that. Am I accidentally feeding? Sorry, guys, I'm feeding volume into something I shouldn't have done. Sorry about that. So I'm adding this on in the background, and I wonder if they actually heard double one of you. But anyway, fair enough. So no animus, Nothing in particular that was trying to upset anybody. What's funny is our chat just told me that Steve has an echo, which isolates nothing for me since I've got two Steves. Okay, do you want to move forward as you started pulling on this thread? So let's do the thread, and any things that have been expressly ignored, forgotten, unknown to the media coverage that you've had, which has basically been unfavorable, but nobody's really evaluated the story, it seems like. You want to get some of that out?
The media coverage has been absolutely awful, and I'm talking about both the mainstream left, if you want to call it left-wing media, or the more conservative-leaning media. It's been horrific. Nobody will go out and actually do the work at all. They sit back in their comfortable offices and in their homes, and they comment basically based on whatever the FBI has said about this case, or what their response has been, or more importantly, what their sources have leaked to CBS, have leaked to the New York Times, have leaked to the Washington Post. That's the only thing that the press has been covering. And of course, the key word, and this is a word that they obviously don't know anything about, is that all of mine and Joe's work has been debunked.
How
debunked
is it
by who?
Right. So I keep reading that the now debunked story, the conspiracy theory, et cetera, et cetera. What is the conspiracy? Why is it, and who debunked it?
Well, first of all, most of them don't try to loop in a conspiracy at all. They call Joe and I conspiracy theorists. Even the lawsuit referred to Joe as, having a long record of being a conspiracist, journalist, which is not true at all. He's been a hard news guy and an investigative journalist for 40 years.
He did work for Epoch. And apparently, this is what I read yesterday. This is how I read it out to the audience. But it's like he worked for Epoch Times. Epoch Times apparently has some editorial, softness. But there's no allegation that he does. It's just that he worked for people who also publish other garbage stories. It's like
right. Yeah,
it's like Playboy used to do really good journalism, but they also used to do pornography. So you're associated with pornographers, even though you're doing journalism. A lot of the really great interviews that got done for many years were coming out of Playboy magazine for whatever reason.
I think
they characterize Epoch Times as being run by Falun Gong, the cult religious group out of China. They do the same thing with Blaze Media. Blaze Media is a Mormon-run company. No, it's not. Actually, when you walk through the Blaze headquarters, the first time I walked through Blaze headquarters on Ash Wednesday, fully 1/3 of the employees there
it's like the FBI.
Catholic. Right. It's all bullshit narrative that they paint with a wide brush based on, very singular aspects of a particular company or journalist or whatever. But, in this particular case, I'm appalled at the media. I mean, this is one of the things that this is becoming a story unto itself, is how bad the media is on this. And I don't want to jump ahead on you, Kyle, but if you just take the three FBI sources who confirmed that they had seen video of Shauni Kirkoff on the evening of January 5th, a timestamped video proving that she was at home at the time that the gray hooded bomber was trekking around the Capitol, planting suspicious devices, and that they saw, I quote, her playing with her puppies. We now know that was a bullshit story to begin with. And by evidence that now has been released by the law firm of CIA, Clairlock, FBI, and the old gray lady.
Go ahead, friend.
Well, I think what Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman have done, which has offended the sensibilities of the media so much, I'm glad that Steve's highlighting this, that they actually did journalism that extended outside of just talking to sources. You went out there and actually walked the route. You got down on your hands and knees and measured the bricks like a true investigator. And all too often, what we're seeing from the mainstream media here that is purposely doing spin on behalf of the government is that they want to defend their turf and say, well, we're real journalists. Well, what makes you a real journalist? I have sources. You mean sources that are giving you what the institutions want them to give you because you have access to? So they're spinning, so that they can continue to carry water, and you're throwing a giant actual real pipe bomb metaphorically into what it is to be a journalist in America today. And that involves more than just talking to people on the inside who are feeding you the narrative that they want you to go with.
Bingo. I couldn't have said it any better myself. That's it. That is it. They are taking their narrative from their principal sources at the FBI, at CIA, inside the IC, inside the DOD, wherever their favorite sources are on a particular topic. That's what they deliver, is what they're told, not because they've done the work. And this is the one thing that really angers me, and I'm throwing it in their faces now on a daily basis. In fact, just as we were signing on today, I got a call from a reporter. I'm not going to say which publication, but this reporter and I got into a heated battle yesterday. He flat out accused me of falsely destroying this woman's life with our story. And he knew nothing about the fact that I've personally spent hundreds of hours in the Capitol CCTV viewing room, that my team has spent thousands of hours reviewing video of this particular incident alone, not even the entire January 6th arc. He had no idea that, as you pointed out, friend, is that I got on my hands and knees with a tape measure and measured the bricks, measured the concrete blocks at the DNC and the RNC, so that we could get an accurate mathematical measurement of the shoes that were being worn by the bomber, and then compare it to where I also went and measured in Woodbridge the exact spot, the exact gutter, street, concrete sidewalk blocks that Brian Cole Jr. traversed on body cam in a fender bender accident that he had back in the summer of 2024. And so they've done none of this work. And by the way, that's just a couple of examples of the work we've done. We've canvassed the neighborhood. We've interviewed the neighbors. We've talked to the family. We've done things that they don't do while they sit back in their comfortable, air-conditioned MSM palaces or wherever they work from, and take phone calls from the FBI telling them what they should be saying.
Yes. You want to go with the top few things off the top of your head that are inaccurate characterizations of the story? We have the New York Times that's recently done it. There's a bunch of people that have basically, their claim is now debunked. The debunking was done initially by 3 sources unknown about dogs or puppies or a dog, and no one seems to know. Even yesterday, I identified inside the New York Times article that they somehow have a problem with the word dogs versus dog, just like they couldn't figure out whether it was a dog, puppies, her playing with them, or her not being with them at all, which is really wild to me. There's like a whole bunch of things that have been listed as these are actually facts, zero background. Then there's the work that you guys have been doing for literally months now, and you want to kind of highlight where they're at and you know, what false claims have been made that are the most sticking in your craw at the moment?
Yeah, the biggest characterization or mischaracterization that sticks in my craw is the idea that gait analysis is junk science. And that's not only been used by her law firm, it's been used by major publications. It has been used, the term gait analysis or gait recognition software is junk science, has been used by every single critic of our work, mine and Joe's work, and our story in general, and our ability to identify this. What they fail to cover and what they fail to mention is that, first of all, gait analysis has been used in law, in courtrooms, to help determine cases, identify perpetrators, and to also provide exculpatory information that clears people for hundreds of years in the American court system all the way back to the early 1800s. Additionally, with the advent of computer technology, gait recognition is considered by most analysts as more accurate than face recognition and as accurate as fingerprints, which is all computerized now as well. You were about to say something, Steve?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how the criticism that you're getting, well, before I get to that, I sort of make the parallel, the analogy between your story being debunked and being called a so-called whistleblower. It's actually coming from the exact same people, which I do appreciate.
Right.
But the fundamental, I don't know, the historically known clue for any sort of criminal violation. Whenever there's an investigation going on from a law enforcement perspective, or from a private investigator, or from a journalist, it's like, we should look for footprints. Footprints. So I tend to put gait analysis and foot measurements in that category. And I don't know, maybe taking one of the other top of mind ones out there. Can you kind of go into the foot measurement thing to me, which I just think is simultaneously hysterical and extremely relevant because of the physical description that we're getting about the pipe bomb?
Yeah, let me start off by saying you pointed out something very interesting. When you're talking about just footprints, we're not talking about just the soles of the shoes. You can tell it with whether it's a Nike Air Max Speed Turf or a pair of Doc Martens. I mean, you can certainly tell the difference in the imprint in mud or in a soft soiled area, but they're measuring in footprints. They're measuring which side of the foot they're leaning on, which side of the foot they favor. They can measure the foot steps and see whether that foot is crossing over, whether they're pigeon-toed or whether they're, duck-toed in terms of how their feet move when they're walking. Are their feet splayed out to the left and the right? Does one side cross over to the other? I mean, all these things are part of gait analysis and have been for hundreds of years. But more importantly, and this is really getting to the heart of our work and how we've been debunked or allegedly debunked, is that the very same gait podiatrist recognition specialist that we also took this to confirm our previous analysis refused to take our case and work for us for pay, because they were the one also reporting. He was the same expert reporting to the FBI.
Didn't want to lose a really big contract.
Didn't want to lose the ongoing big contract. Exactly. But I will also say this, is that when it comes to this particular aspect of our story, gait recognition, just a couple of examples. These are anecdotal of thousands of other examples, but in the Nancy Guthrie case, the FBI used gait recognition to try and identify the suspect. An actual January 6th pipe bomb suspect was cleared by the FBI by their use of gait recognition software to clear him. The intelligence community and the Department of Defense use gait recognition every single day to identify targets overseas in the battlefield arena. We have consulted with those experts. We have shown them our evidence, and that's where the 98% match comes from, is the human experts that are targeting analysts.
Can we walk through some of the suppositions or some of the things that we can infer from the allegations made in the New York Times and some of the other sort of quote unquote debunks, or they just assume debunking? The things that I saw that would have followed on from Steve Baker brought gait analysis only to members of the intelligence community. Okay. And then a series of follow-on events happened. And those events, I think, were presented in a recent lawsuit, the defamation suit against you and Hanneman and the Blaze. And I believe that the reason that they presented them is to kind of show the damages that were incurred by this woman. But correct me if I'm wrong, Baker, I don't see how damages could be incurred by you if they were done by the federal government to include the intelligence community, IC elements from ODNI to CIA, etc., DHS mechanisms, whatever was involved. And then theoretically, your gait recognition solely, because that's what they're claiming. I know that there's more, but let's just say that was it. You bringing them gait recognition in a name was enough to launch FBI SWAT teams on search warrants. Either you have an incredible power that I was unaware of previously, and I'm happy to be your friend, that you can control intelligence and law enforcement agencies, or there was more than what you brought alone, and what you brought was more than what they've said. Would that be, am I in the arena here?
Yeah, let's take it a step further back, though, is that in this criticism, both, if you depending upon who you're listening to or reading, if you're reading the lawsuit, if you're reading the New York Times, or if you're reading even some of the right-wing publications, is that this humble journalist sitting before you right now, who's a former David Bowie tribute act, singer.
I did hear that about
This guy whose only background was knowing how to sing, Let's Dance, and some songs from all eras of David Bowie's career, but also a lifelong musician. Is that I somehow, as such a diminished person, and indeed an insurrectionist on January 6th, which is also another mischaracterization that they put out there, that this person right here, in great point, Kyle, I have so much power over the intelligence community that I sent all of the resources of ODNI, NCTC, NCIC, HSI, FBI, CIA into panic mode.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to the part of the story so we can hit the high points that are out there.
I have so much power over the intelligence community that they unleashed this horrific raid onto Shauni Kirkoff and her partner Dan Dickert's household. They ransacked the place. They absolutely destroyed her life. She says she can no longer walk around the neighborhood with a Capitol Police shirt on, or anything else identifying her as law enforcement. That she, and of course, they claim that she's lost friends over this, that she's lost comrades. Well, no, she walked away. The friends she had at Capitol Police, she left them. She changed her phone numbers, changed her email address, wiped clean and shut down all of her known social media accounts when she left, and disappeared. This is from our sources at the Capitol Police, because they really liked her. As I said earlier, it's like we were good friends, and all of a sudden she disappeared.
She was working for Capitol Police January 6th. She continued on there for a little period of time, and then somewhere in the next 6 months, she ended up going over to the CIA as a force protection officer or something in the protective world.
Right.
And at that time, the people that were her friends, that liked her, that thought well of her, that were her colleagues, and she didn't move out of the state, so it's not like it was a natural, well, we just fell out of touch. She wiped her phone number and her contacts and no longer was in touch with her former colleagues who thought well of her. And her claim is that she's been alienated from those people, despite the fact that she voluntarily dropped them, let's say 5 years earlier. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. I mean, she certainly has not lost her family members. She's not lost her paycheck. I mean, even after failing the polygraph that the FBI gave her two days before our story came out, the CIA kept her employed. I think she got 2 weeks of leave. I'm certain it was paid leave. We know that her boyfriend or partner, whatever you want to call him, Dan Dickert, that he was apparently on leave for maybe up to 90 days from Capitol Police because he claimed that he had fear for his life. Now, we know this from, very high-ranking sources at the Capitol Police, that he was gone for quite some time. I think he's back now, from what I hear. But nobody lost anything. They didn't lose their paychecks. They didn't lose their money. They didn't lose their house. They didn't lose their cars. They didn't lose their dog. But they're claiming, substantial loss as a result of not only our story, but what the intelligence community did to them by raiding their home and putting them under this intense scrutiny for so long.
Steve, you've deprived her of the ability to walk around her neighborhood wearing police paraphernalia for an agency that did her so dirty that she still wants to wear it, even though she has no contact with people there who now have abandoned her. And it's probably pretty retarded to wear law enforcement paraphernalia if you're not in law enforcement. It's a good way to get involved in a physical altercation with somebody who doesn't like the police.
Right. She also said that she could no longer wear, her Temple University, T-shirts, sweatshirts, gear, whatever from her alma mater.
MS Now said that. So, gents, MS Now, I'm just seeing this as I'm kind of like searching through some of the stuff. MS Now says that the Blaze just made it up. They just made up the story that she was involved. Do you want to address that? That's literally a headline
strategy, Cotton,
from the beginning of this week, coming from Jordan Rubin. You want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, and this is an incredible assertion, is that we just made it up. And this is coming directly from the bowels of CIA / Clairlock / FBI / New York Times. This is exactly the narrative that they are putting out there, is that somehow, for some reason, Joe Hanneman and I just pulled this name out of our ass or randomly out of a hat of the 2,000 uniformed Capitol police officers that were not on duty, by the way, 2,000 uniformed police officers, 70% of which were on administrative leave that day, only 200 to 250 who were actually on duty on January 6th. She was one of them, and that we randomly just selected her to make up this story.
Right.
And this is unbelievable, considering the amount of published work that Joe and I have released.
And to say nothing of the reality that the FBI within a week had a surveillance team on a door that was next to hers in the general DMV area, which I don't know, I'd put the odds there at a trillion to one. I mean, similar to the level of odds.
It's
that
actually
you would
6
be
trillion to
looking
1
for an explosive device in Washington, D.C. and go to one bush that exactly was the bush that it was placed under, and have it not be there because it was removed. And then the only other bush you go to is the one where it is under.
All right. Take a quick breath, folks. If you're watching on Rumble, same thing on YouTube. You may hear an ad on the Spotify side. We're going long because I think this is a fruitful conversation, and there's probably information you haven't heard. Follow us at KyleSeraphinShow.com on Spotify if you've not done so already. Subscribe to the other channels if you haven't done so. What the heck is wrong with you? I'm just playing. All right, gentlemen. Mr. Baker, can we go through the most interesting claims? I have the lawsuit pulled up. In contrast to maybe what Brian Cole Jr.'s people filed, I noticed that the New York Times put the polygraph as the last paragraph or second to last paragraph, saying that she failed a polygraph, which seems really, really important to me as a former law enforcement guy who worked in an intelligence agency called the FBI. Steve Friend can comment on the likelihood that you survive a polygraph failure and then get to keep your job. That doesn't happen unless what you're doing is okay already.
You don't survive that because you have to have a valid polygraph on file in order to have a security clearance, unless Kash Patel waives it for you if your name's Daniel Bongino.
That's true. Baker, you want to do that? You want to kind of dive into like the high points of the wild allegations? Mostly, it seemed like they're trying to pick apart your reporting without actually addressing any of your reporting. It seems like they've created like they've strawmanned the reporting that you did. Is that an accurate characterization?
Right. Well, the first thing is always the politics of personal destruction. In fact, the only reason that the New York Times did not go harder on me personally was simply this, is that the reporter was under the impression, real or perceived, that I recorded our interview. And so she ended up taking 2 hours of interview.
How do you know that?
Distilling it down to about 2. What's that?
How do you know that?
Because in the second interview, when she called me the eve before the publication of the story, which was this week, she called me, and the first thing she asked me was, "Did you record our previous conversation?" Which was about an hour and a half long. I said, "Maybe." And she said, "Well, I'll take the maybe as a yes." And I said, "Maybe." And then she followed that up by saying, "Do you always record people without notifying them that they're being recorded?" And I said, I only notify them when I'm conducting the interview.
The assumption in general, I would think, that is if you're speaking to a reporter, that one side or the other is recording it is a pretty easy thing to assume. I think it's good practice to say it, but it's common that if the ability exists legally in your area, then you're going to do that, if nothing else, to make sure you get your quotations correct.
That's right. And it's to hold their feet to the fire. And I learned
From
this on January 6th. Yeah, exactly. Especially when you're dealing with, mainstream media journalists, is because they will typically take an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, or an all-day interview session. They distill it down into 30 seconds or 3 minutes for the evening broadcast, and they can manipulate that and put it in a different context than any manner of a desire of what their editorial direction is. And so holding them accountable is incredibly important. But going back to the politics of personal destruction, the one thing that everyone is now bringing up since the lawsuit and the New York Times story has come out is all of the media is revisiting again, of course, my full January 6th story is that I'm an insurrectionist, that I was never a journalist, that I suddenly became a journalist after January 6th, and I knew that I was in trouble, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right down the line. And of course, I get it. I understand it. They all go to the quote unquote statement of facts that were written by the FBI, signed off by Special Agent Craig Noyes, given to the DOJ with all of the claims of the potential crimes that I may have committed that day. All of which are, every one of them were taken either out of context or made up out of whole cloth and turned those into potentially criminal activities or something that showed my mindset as an insurrectionist and as nothing more than somebody who wanted to join the mob in ransacking the Capitol that day. None of which happened, by the way. It's all on video. We've released that video. It's all on YouTube. You can see my entire 37 minutes inside the Capitol. You can see the minutes leading up to my arrival. You can see that hundreds of people went inside the Capitol before I did. And of course, nobody ever mentions the fact that something between 80 and 100 other journalists also entered the Capitol from the outside to follow the story where the story went, which is exactly what I was doing and exactly as I behaved on camera that day. But they never get into any of that. It's just the fact that I was indicted. I pled guilty to the charges. They also never mentioned the fact that the only reason I pled guilty is because Trump had just won the election, and we had from the inside absolute confirmation, 100%, that the pardons were coming, and that if I pled guilty before my sentencing hearing, this is an interesting federal aspect of the law, is that until you are sentenced by a federal judge, you are not convicted. That is the law of the land. And so I knew that I wouldn't get a pardon, and I didn't. I got a case dismissal with prejudice because of the blanket commutations, pardons, and dismissals that the president issued on Inauguration Day. We knew it was coming, so I rolled the dice, played the 4D chess game, and I won.
Yeah, I mean, but the argument against you, Steve, is that you're a jerk, and you don't like jerks, do you, reader? Like, readers... Do you know what a jerk he is? He's a jerk. And so jerks are not to be liked. And if you like Steve, then you like jerks. What does that say about you, jerk? So that's essentially what I read out of that. Friend, can I go to you? Can I have you summarize as best you're able the story put forward by Shauni Kirkoff's people, now in a press release via the New York Times, and some of the things, and then not any of the parts that you know to be problematic that they've seemed to gloss over. Can you just tell the story and maybe any evolutions of the story as you recall it? Because I think this would be kind of fun, just having the two of you and Baker kind of mix up the what happened versus what they would like you to believe happened, maybe.
So on the night in question, Shauni Kirkoff has represented that she was not, in fact, walking around the nation's capital and dropping inert devices that would have been bombs if they had been bombs. But in fact, she was home with the boy who's her friend, who she's, I guess, betrothed to, and they were playing with puppies. But that wound up being the brand new Greyhound that they just bought, even though it's an old dog. And the verification we got was that they were videoing the dog as it was twitching while it slept. And she was wanting to point out how its vein was protruding on its neck as it was twitching. And this is captured by a video, but her voice is what is captured. And that is ultimately what exonerated her from the FBI, which I from our understanding, they took a video that may or may not have her voice on it and said that, yes, that in fact is proof that she was innocent of all charges. And now Steve Baker, because he doesn't like 5'7" women with a limp with a soccer background, has just pulled her out of nowhere and accused her of dropping the pipe bombs on January 5th.
All right, let me hone in on what you just said. The defendants, that's Baker and others involved, spurious claims eventually fell apart. Apparently your claims have fallen apart, Mr. Baker. For one, Ms. Kerkhoff had an alibi, and she gave prosecutors and law enforcement evidence that on the evening of January 5th, 2021, she was not planting pipe bombs around Washington, D.C., but rather at her home with her boyfriend, who was video recording Bella, their greyhound. As they watched Bella twitch in her sleep, Ms. Kerkhoff's voice was clear in the video that has not been released to anybody, but has been substantiated by this screenshot of a dog laying on a couch.
Look at all that
So-
audio in the screenshot.
So you can see the audio says, you can see how clear her voice is in this screenshot from the video. Quote, "I told you," Miss Kerkhoff said, laughing. "You can see her neck vein sticking out. Do you see it? That's how I know that it's real, because they're talking about a neck vein of Bella, the retired greyhound." And so what do you make of that, Mr. Baker? Are you debunked?
Well, no. First of all, this is the third iteration of the puppies/dog story. The first iteration was, as we pointed out earlier, a CBS News story in which CBS had 3 FBI sources confirm the existence of a timestamp video of her, quote unquote, playing with her puppies. Then we did something very interesting, because they're stupid and they don't know that we actually do journalistic work. We had already done deep dives into the dark web, and we had found photography from her deleted social media accounts. All right. And what we discovered was that she had adopted an adult greyhound from Florida, and her and her partner, Dan Dickert, had driven down to Florida to adopt this adult greyhound. The adoption date, or at least when they presented it on social media, was 1 month to the day before January 5th, on December 5th, 2020. So they present this online, and I was now under a gag order at this time from the Blaze. I could no longer talk about Shauni Kirkoff's case.
Not a legal gag order. This is from your employer. I just want to be real clear on
Correct.
that. Okay.
Yes, it was a gag order because of the fear of a company crippling existential defamation lawsuit from Shauni Kirkoff.
Right.
And so we were no longer allowed to talk about it. So I released through my proxies. Thank you, Kyle Seraphin.
What? Who does that?
A dog video of the adoption, and then also not a video, but a photograph, and then also a screenshot of a 5-star review that Shauni Kirkoff had given to their dog sitter about the dog and his babysitting, dog sitting capabilities. Now, this information was released, and as a result of that, they had to do a panic turnaround, because it was no longer 3 puppies. It was a singular adult dog, confirmed by the dog sitter that this one dog was the only one he was sitting. And so then when they finally hit the Blaze, myself and Joe, with what they called the demand/preservation letter in advance of a potential lawsuit, they had changed the story from she was at home playing with her puppies, as seen by 3 FBI sources.
Correct. Yeah.
To she was at home caring for her dog. The video shows her caring for her dog. Then we get the new iteration through the lawsuit and through after the release by, of all people, Brian Cole's attorneys of the failed polygraph, and then the subsequent emergency filings that happened from the government and back and forth that same week, is we learned that there was a third iteration to the story, and that, in fact, was that the video does not show Shauni Kirkoff at all. It shows the adult dog asleep on the couch, and her voice can be heard in the background.
All right, so here's the some of the deep web scrapes here that I was able to duplicate your work. I didn't need any special tools. I may or may not have been trained to do certain things, and I know how to find some stuff when people ask me. This is from Pet Finder, and this is Shauni and Bella, adopted November 2020 greyhound. We found Bella on Pet Finder, immediately fell in love with her. It's the we. I assume that's her and Dan Dickert. Made the trek from Virginia to Florida to get her. It's the best decision we ever made. She's the sweetest. It's a great addition to our family and our home. We don't know who rescued whom. Please consider adopting a retired greyhound. There's the animal. There's some other video pictures of that too I can put up as well, which I'll do in just a second here. But this is some of the stuff you did. And then you also found, I think I've got it actually, I think I saved the entire web page, but there was a review on Google saying, you know, that the dog was being handled by this dog walker. You interviewed the dog walker, did you not?
One of our team did. Yeah, I didn't personally.
Yeah. What was the result of that? What was that all about?
Just basically confirmed that it was a singular dog, and I mean there were some other personal comments that are not germane to this story that don't matter, but I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah, yeah. Was there anything unusual about the hiring process for this dog walker, as you recall?
No, I don't. Remind me.
Go ahead. I heard there was a background check. Maybe
There was a background check.
Yes, there was. That's right. There was.
Yeah.
There was a background.
What is that all about, Steve?
Well, I don't consider it highly unusual for a CIA asset to do a background check on anyone that they're working with in their personal life.
You ever heard of that one, Steve Baker? I'm sorry, friend. Have you ever heard of anybody getting a background check for someone that comes into their home for a dog?
Well, that would be the default setting for somebody who works in law enforcement to be super OPSEC in everything that they're all about. That would be like a Kyle Seraphin type of move.
I don't think I would do that. Then again, I probably wouldn't have a dog walker because my wife stays home. But
I mean, we are ignoring the giant story here, gents.
Please.
Counterpoint to everything that Baker has presented, CBS had sources.
Well, obviously, yeah. That's the biggest problem. So here's the issue that I'm seeing, Steve, because I want to bring up the lawsuit again here because I think it's fun. I mean, it's not fun, but it's fun. They debunked what you just said in the lawsuit. It says,
Did they?
Here they are. Baker conspicuously stepped away from the podcast. By the way, we did a podcast entitled It's All Connected, which seemed to upset this law firm since they mentioned it by name. I always enjoy that when people watch the podcast for dirt, like we're not publicly broadcasting it. Hi, Claire Locke. So you conspicuously stepped away, which you actually physically did step away. I could see your camera that you weren't there, and read line by line the retraction demand by the council. What they failed to also mention in that is that I was more than willing to have a conversation with Shauni Kirkoff, that I was willing to evaluate the evidence that they had, and that we'd be more than happy to present an apology if one was warranted, if exculpatory information that we could, sort of validate was available. But there's no malice involved with saying that somebody is a story, that they were involved in January 6th, that they meet all the criteria of the thing, and that independent research has pointed them out as a good subject. That's not full of malice. I think we also explained an alternate theory that we have, which is that there was no malice involved at all, that she in fact was probably being asked to do something by not her, and that she was a gung-ho type of employee, which is probably why the people around her liked her. Everybody loves someone that's willing to go and do all the work all the time. It's a good person to have on your team. Anyway, I attempted to draw contrast. This is Seraphin attempted. This is from their lawsuit, which is not about me, but conspicuously involves me. My name is like 30 times in this suit. Attempted to draw contrast between the language of Ms. Kerkhoff's retraction demand, which plainly explained that, quote, video evidence conclusively demonstrates Ms. Kerkhoff was at home caring for her dog on January 5th, and CBS News reporting, which stated Ms. Kerkhoff provided an alibi video of her playing with her dogs. Let me just go to Steve Friend. Steve Friend, do words mean things generally?
Generally, in my experience, they do. However, I guess when it comes to the government, they only have medium confidence in the English language or grammar.
Okay, so have you ever owned a dog? Do you guys have a dog now?
I'm thankfully in the clear. I hadn't been
though.
able to breathe for the last 15 years, but they've now been duly departed. But yeah, I've owned 2 dogs.
Okay, and did you ever mistake one dog that was old and near death or retired from professional work for puppies? Have you ever made that mistake?
No. I think that we graduated from calling them a puppy to a dog, and then they became old dogs. That's
sometime after like a decade, you look at them. Okay, so it'd be really hard for me to conflate the words dog versus puppies, and I'm not trying to just be some sort of pedantic jerk. I think that as a person who was an investigator for a federal agency, I actually think that that details matter. And when people tell me the story, hey, I was hanging out with my girlfriend on that night, and you go, oh, that's cool. And then they're like, just kidding. It was like actually my brother and his girlfriend. That's a distinction that matters to me. That's not your girlfriend. That's somebody else's girlfriend. If you tell me like, hey, I was hanging out with my babies, and you're like, actually, I just have one adult son. That's a weird thing that we would look at and go, yeah, those are not easily conflated. Them pointing this out to me is an admission. And by the way, the video evidence, Baker, conclusively demonstrates that she was at home. Who is it conclusively demonstrated it to, out of curiosity? Why would you know that as you're being served with this lawsuit? Why would I know that as I'm reading my name in it?
The only thing that's conclusive is that they have served up in the lawsuit the 3rd iteration of a story which conflicts with what the FBI told them in the first place through their 3 FBI sources. Now, I don't, I've imagined who the 3 sources are. It's probably, it could have been Cash, Dan, and Marshall Yates, or Cash, Dan, and Ben Williamson. Those could have been the 3 sources straight from the 7th floor. But we know that most of this BS has come from the 7th floor of the Hoover Building anyway.
Let's just go straight to the New York Times article, which was released 2 days ago. Was it yesterday? It was updated yesterday, apparently, but they didn't update this part. Okay, I'm going to read a paragraph, then I'm going to read the other 3 instances where the word dog or dogs appears, which, by the way, even the New York Times can't get straight, which means that, to me, it may be a CIA-wide problem that the plurality or the singularity of canines is like a mental block. Maybe the bots that are running things can't do it.
That's
Shauni
the bigger
Kirkoff.
story, is the plural singular versus the dog puppy thing, because people can have rhetorical flourish to be like, oh, I'm going to be playing with my puppy later. And it's just the dog you've had. But when you're singular versus plural, there's an inconsistency.
Okay, so here it is. But her schedule, this is talking about Shauni Kirkoff, but her schedule had been altered during the government shutdown. This is going back to November of 25. So she was enjoying a day off, curled up in her living room, the dogs, plural, nearby. Okay, no further information on that. Now we're going to go on. Mr. Dickert's cell phone rang. This is when the FBI was raiding their house because Steve Baker sicked the FBI on them because he has incredible powers to manipulate law enforcement agencies. And when that happened, Dickert says, he said that an agent on the other end gave a chilling command: come out of the house unarmed with your dogs. Plural again. Not clear why. Now we're going to go to the next instance of it. And I'm pointing this out for a very specific reason, people, because these words are not compatible. Here is Miss Kerkhoff. The picture doesn't show up in this archive version I have, with her dog, singular, Bella. Video of her dog ultimately proved Miss Kerkhoff's innocent. This is the 4 times it's mentioned in the story. It's a conflation of dog and dogs. I'll do the same thing on the lawsuit. So are you guys ready? Here's the lawsuit that was served. 14 times the word dog or dogs appears. And in this case, the defendants succeeded in their mission, irreparably harming Miss Kerkhoff. I think that's an interesting conclusory allegation. Blah, blah, blah. CIA placed Miss Kerkhoff on administrative leave. Okay, so FBI bomb dogs, plural. Those are probably actually more than one dog if the FBI had bomb dogs. Although I bet you there's only one, because I've never seen 2 bomb dogs on a single search. You ever seen two dogs instead of one, Steve? Friend?
No.
You usually bring one because otherwise they get into each other's business.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine, whatever. So allegedly dogs. Here's the story again, exactly from the New York Times. Again, Mr. Dickert said, come out of the house unarmed with your dogs. I actually do want to break on this for a second before we come back to the dog story. Friend, how many SWAT search warrants do you think you've served, estimate?
So SWAT for about 6 years. And I mean, let's say conservatively, you were doing 1 operation a month. Like we'll be real conservative with it. That would be 70.
Okay, so 70, and then you've also done plenty of search warrants on your own.
Sure. Yes.
Have you ever done call outs?
Yes.
Okay, so surround the house, establish perimeter, and then a call out.
Yes.
Have you ever instructed a criminal subject or someone that is being searched to come out unarmed with their dogs out of curiosity?
No, you would not do that. As much as a dog could present a threat, you would not want them to be holding a dog because you want their hands to
come
be
out
clear.
with unarmed and bring your potential canine weapon with you. Is that a thing that's ever been done in a SWAT call out that you're aware of?
No. And I've done SWAT call outs where they actually had pit bulls that were for home defense.
Right.
So,
for sure. I've done a bunch of
analogy.
those. So I've been on about 50 plus SWAT call out or SWAT search warrants. Usually it's an unannounced kind of thing. They knock and announce at the door. They'll say, make sure you're unarmed or whatever, but then they go into the door. I've done a couple of call outs with them. I've done it as a medic, as a support crew for the SWAT team in Washington, D.C. And I've probably done 50 or 60 of those because we used to do them once a week and I did them all the time. So we had 2 teams, much more high volume than what was going on in your field office. We had a lot more people assigned to the SWAT program. It's a busy urban area. I have never heard, and I've also been on SWAT searches with other local PDs, task force officers, SWAT teams, and so on, multiple different areas around Arlington and the DC metro area. I've literally never seen somebody come out unarmed with your dogs.
No, you would ask them once they came outside, are there dogs inside for safety?
100%. Yeah, for sure. Because I'm going to go in there. But is it not standard practice for FBI SWAT to get a briefing on what your contingency is for animals that are hostile and then what you're bringing to mitigate that?
The SWAT matrix, the decision tree, it's called a matrix. One of the reasons that you're allowed to call in SWAT is the presence of dogs. Mm-hmm. So yes, that's one of the factors that are brought in. I mean, and they get really in the weeds. I mean,
and what do you
essentially
carry?
Like tide reports and waxing and waning moons. They would fill you in on whether or not there's dogs present at the scene.
Yeah, and who finds out if there's dogs in the scene?
The case agent who's working the case, or the site survey when you're actually doing surveillance.
Okay, so the surveillance team can do it. If you have a surveillance team, it could be the SWAT team leader. If it's going to be a SWAT team hit and they're going out and taking a look, or whoever's assigned to do that surveillance. Generally speaking, you know not only who's regularly in the house, but what sort of animals are present, whether or not there's a security system, which way the door opens, where the hinges are, if there's a security gate on the outside of it. I mean, these things are fairly formulaic because you kind of want to know, what's the construction of the door? What's the entrance accessible by? Is it going to be stairs? Guys, I'm giving you this background because in law enforcement, you don't just drive up to a house randomly, having never seen it before, having no idea what's going on inside, and then just go, come out with no weapons. And if you happen to have dogs, plural, bring them with you. This is not a thing that's ever happened. This piece right here from the lawsuit is very, very weird. And it's been sticking in my craw, Mr. Baker, as I've read it a couple times over. It's one of the weirder things. We had a conversation about it yesterday. I've literally never heard someone say, come out with your dogs. Steve, did you guys carry measures to be able to handle dogs if they were violent? Other than a firearm?
They're called pew-pews.
Okay. Did you guys run in with fire extinguishers at all?
We did have fire extinguishers, but really, in my experience, it actually wasn't an FBI thing. We threw flashbangs at them because they cower up real quick.
So flashbangs are effective. Washington Field SWAT encountered dogs so frequently that it was regular that they had a mitigation guy that would come in with a fire extinguisher to back him into a room, and then they'd close the door. Anyway, there's tactics. Let me just say, law enforcement has tactics to deal with your dog. They don't want you bringing it outside and then seeing what happens next. That seems like a really good way to get your dog shot. Anyway, why do they say dogs here, boys? Why is the FBI telling him to come out with dogs, plural?
I think they're kind of working together on a narrative. I mean, isn't that ultimately what the author of the New York Times piece described herself as? Somebody who is really big on the narrative.
Steve, you talk to her. Go ahead, and then I'm going to find the next one.
Empathetic narrative. Let's get really specific there. It's in her bio. Her New York Times bio concludes with a sentence about how she specializes in the empathy aspect of her subjects that she writes about.
Okay, paragraph 141, the defendant's reporting was false. She was not the pipe bomber. She's a normal private person with a family and a career and hobbies, and she was at home with her boyfriend and their dog. Now we're back to singular at the time that the pipe bomber was doing the thing. So that's instance number 4 of the word. We're going to go down here. This is us talking about whether or not dog versus puppies matters. I'm continuing to prove to you that it does as we go through. There it is again. They've gone back to the story, which is the difference in the follow-up that she was playing with her dog, singular. Steve, you never retracted anything, and so there's a distinction, a semantic non-distinction between puppies and dogs. Audience, do me a big favor. If you have not dropped a comment yet, I'd like to know if you think that there's a difference between puppies and dogs, just as a general sort of anecdotal survey of
No, not puppies and dogs. Puppies and dog.
Singular, yes. So we're talking about a numerological difference, and then also the difference between generally age. I am totally down with the idea.
And wait. We have to make sure that those who are commenting understand that playing with her puppies was confirmed by three sources. Professional FBI sources.
All right. But on page 100 of the lawsuit, they also mentioned she was not out planting pipe bombs. She was actually at home with her dog. Again, they've actually conflicted with their own lawsuit here, saying that she was at home with dogs curled up. And I'll come back to that again, but we're on instance number 9 of that word. Now we're down to paragraph 345. She's not out planting bombs. She's at home with her dog. We've now locked into this as we got into the lawsuit, which is voluminous. It's 100 and something, 30 pages or so. What is it? 127 pages.
127 pages.
All right. She was not out planting pipe bombs, but she was home recording video. Hold on. At home recording her. She was video recording her dog. Sorry, that's a awkward statement. On the evening of January the 5th, she was not out planting pipe bombs, but home video recording her dog. We're back to singular still. So we locked in there. That's instance number 11. She's home recording video recording her dog. This is number 12. This is the next one. Boyfriend and her dog, as confirmed by video reporting that no one's ever seen. And then the last instance on page 122 is that she was at home with her boyfriend and their dog. And the problem is that the first instance that is mentioned is this idea that they've got these dogs curled up. Here's the article. Dog, come out of your house with your dogs because the dogs are nearby where they're curled up in their homes. I don't know, man. That is a distinction. That's what happens when you lie poorly, in my experience. People say things that are not true, and they're like, yeah, this thing happened. And you're like, oh, except that thing is not the thing that happened, as proven by any number of other things. And you don't want to.
So I had the opportunity 2 days ago to have a nice little respite from my normal routine, and I met up with two actual retired FBI agents, 20-something, 21, 23 years, and 25 years respectively with the Bureau. One of the two that I met with is he himself is one of the two highest awarded FBI agents in the Bureau's history.
Okay.
And we were able to sit down, have cigars, and discuss, all the matters of this case. And both of them have, first of all, a real problem with this distinction between puppies, plural, and dog, singular. It's a mistake that they would not have made in their long careers with the Bureau. In whether it was in a 302 or whether it was in a statement of facts, or whatever the case may be, this is not a mistake that they would make. They also were very humorously going over how these leaks happen, how they're purposeful to the press. That it was it's common, just common practice. They all know who they're going to leak to, and especially. Since they've both worked, in the Washington field office, how that works there when you're making, your leaks on a political nature and who they're going to contact and how the impact is going to be calculated from these particular leaks. And so they were astounded at how bad a mistake that this was by virtue of the leakers from the FBI, then getting to the law firm itself. That again, this mistake would not happen. And then, of course, there were so many other aspects of this case that they find absolutely absurd, and even including the naysayers that we see that identify themselves as former agents on the Twitter feeds, all of our feeds, who are apologists for the current Patel regime, FBI regime. And claiming that they have all aspects of this right, that they have in fact debunked this story. But one of the key issues that came up in our discussion was this whole issue about this video and how ridiculously easy it will be to change, alter, and purposefully manipulate the timestamp or the metadata on that video. Something that
Guys,
a child can do.
Yeah, I can add off camera voices, and I'm not sophisticated, but I could do it in a few minutes. And when we're done, I may do that to Maria Bartiromo talking to Kash Patel. I may do a voiceover, turn down Kash Patel's audio, and do a voiceover of what I believe Maria Bartiromo is thinking in her head as she stares at the man making excuses about BS. Like, it's really, really freaking easy to put another audio track into something. And then when you're talking about the capabilities of our federal government, who have overthrown other governments and created coups and color revolutions in other places, you think they can't alter the metadata on a video that is that's not even adding video content? They're literally taking potentially a real video. Listen, it could be this easy. This is how crazy it could be. I'm videoing with one hand, or I'm showing you footage on the Ring camera, and I've got you on FaceTime, and you're talking because her voice can quote unquote be clearly heard. What does that mean? What does clearly heard mean? I want to hit Steve Friend up on this one, just devil's advocate. Steve, you're involved in a case and you find that the allegation, everything fits: the size, the weight, the movement, the proximity, the ideology, the possible motive, which is not even derogatory. All this stuff fits in for somebody that you're searching for, but you find out that there's a video of them talking to a dog that they're not on camera with. Are you discontinuing your investigation starting right then? By the way, they just failed the polygraph that you guys got them to do. Where are you at with that one, Steve? Help me out, man.
No, I mean, you would very clearly continue the investigation and record and document everything that is given to you, including the information that might or might not be an alibi for this individual. Like, that's part of the investigation. We're not interested in pinning it on Shauni Kirkoff. We're interested in finding out what happened. That's your job in this case.
Wait. Just a moment, Steve. Dan Bongino, in the exact same phone call with Thomas Massey, in which he said that he would write the check to fund her lawsuit against me in the Blaze, he also said that they were looking at the metadata of this video and with the intention to clear her.
So going in with a predetermined outcome, which is diametrically
Correct.
opposed to everything that is a principle within law enforcement. But, he's arrested thousands of people in his 292 days at the FBI. So he probably knows way more about it.
Baker, in your version of the story, as you conceptualize the greater sort of situation, the greater January 6th pipe bomb, the actual things that took place at the Capitol, and so on and so forth, is Shauni Kirkoff, do you think her actions were likely criminal, number one? And do you think that she's a villain, that she's done something bad, nefarious, or otherwise untoward?
There has certainly been the incuriosity and uninvestigated actions that were taken by those less lethal officers that day. Mm-hmm. We're not only talking about the Capitol Police less lethal squad, but also the Metropolitan Police departments. We have done stories. Joe has done an incredible story about one of the Metro PD officers who point blank went under the bike rack, aimed at the guy's leg with one of these 40 millimeter, flashbang thing, took the guy's leg out. I mean, shattered the leg, the bone. Obviously, he had to be wheeled off in an ambulance, and then additionally 11 months of surgeries and recovery time for him. And this was all caught on camera. I mean, we're talking about a purposeful shot, criminally negligent, designed to be used in a way that they were not trained to do.
Well, so exclude the less than lethal part of it. Let's take that out of the equation. Your belief is it still your ongoing belief that she's the most likely person that would have been dropping those pipe bombs on that night?
I'm 94 to 98% convinced that she could be the match.
Okay, so based on the analysis you've seen, greater odds than not is what you're claiming, and I think that's fair. Like,
yeah. Let me say that. And let me say this, Kyle.
Is she a villain for those actions? Is what I'm getting at. Is she the villain?
Right.
For that night, if she's the person who dropped them.
Okay, for starters, I don't believe that she believed that she was involved in a nefarious action that night. I believe that she was told that she was involved in a training exercise. Her part in a very highly siloed, need-to-know only basis is that here's where the security cams are, here's where the blind spots are, here's where your exit route's going to be. Here's your 4 potential targets where you're going to place the bomb. You'll be able to make those judgments on the night of. For some reason, she sat down at the Congressional Black Caucus bush and attempted to place one there, and then changed her mind, left from there, and went back to the DNC, which she had already done recon on. She had already sat at the DNC bench, so she returns. So the only 2 places that she sat down all night are the only 2 places that the Capitol Police plainclothes counter surveillance officers went to when they were assigned to go discover additional devices.
Okay, so friend, imagine this scenario. You are investigating the placement of potential weapons of mass destruction that were actually inert, and they were determined to be inert by your agency, and you're briefed that they're inert, and you're out doing investigation. You come across somebody who turns out to be a law enforcement officer from another agency that is not yours, that you don't always work with, and that person says, I was asked to place those as part of a training exercise. We were doing a red cell where we were trying to see our response time, our capabilities. We were going to see like if we did the right thing while under pressure. It just turned out there was another event that happened that was also kind of troubling. There was a riot, but at the end of the day, that's what I was briefed on. I was briefed by the following people, and I was told to go do that. Is that person are they a good subject for criminal prosecution?
No.
Just broadly speaking.
No.
Why not?
No, because they were acting in good faith. There was no malice or intent to commit any sort of crime. They were doing it at the behest of their agency, and what they were doing was perfectly 100% legal. And on top of that, they came forward and said, hey, I just want to sew this whole thing up for you. I don't want you guys going down a rabbit hole here that's completely unnecessary. There was no crime here.
Okay, that's the training exercise theory. I wonder if anybody else ever thought that.
Somebody's setting us up, and I want to know who's in on it. You watch now. That bomb was planted after. And it's all going to be phrased when they get caught for trying to frame MAGA people for a fake assassination plot. It's all going to be framed as a training exercise. This is going to be the biggest flag it ever on this show. Oh, was this a training exercise? We dropped this. It was like a red cell thing. We were just testing the security. Watch. They were not testing the security. This was 100% a setup.
What's he talking about? What's Daniel talking about?
Well, of course, he was saying at the time that it was going to be used as a way for them to, crawfish their way out of this event and claim it was just a, ill-timed training exercise gone bad. They got caught with their pants down, so they decided to cover it up. But there was nothing nefarious going on. But now fast forward to summer of last year, and we began hearing from sources inside the Bureau in Washington that they were, in fact, going to float the training exercise theory, that this was going to happen, that they were going to put this out to cover their ass, and why they've not been able to, solve this case, and that it was, somebody handled it really bad, Capitol Police, FBI, the old regime, the Ray regime handled it poorly. But what we now know is that it was just a training exercise, ill-timed, gone bad, or whatever the case may be. And then my partner, actually on the show with you guys, discussed that very thing, did he not?
Look at this.
In October?
We're of one mind here, but I went and looked it up. So if anybody wants to see when we debunk the training exercise, this was another double show where I had Steve Friend and Joe Hanneman in this case. It was episode 671 of this program. Feel free to search it. I can probably put the, you know what? Screw it. I'll put the link over here for you guys who are in the chat on Rumble, and then I'll have to find it for the YouTube folks later. Maybe our mods can find it. But episode 671, we straight up told you these are the holes in the idea, and maybe Steve Friend can give the basics of that show since his memory is quite good. What are the basic holes in the idea of coming forward 5 years later and saying, hey, by the way, sorry, just a training exercise. No big deal.
Well, one, it made no sense at all, because if you were a law enforcement agency, you do partner with other law enforcement agencies. You wouldn't want them to go out there and be doing work if it's completely unnecessary. You would say, hey, we were doing this training exercise. You don't need to bother with that. And then on top of that, if you were going to do a training exercise that involved weapons of mass destruction, you would probably make sure you give them the heads up on that. And there was no indication that had ever been done at this point.
Heads up equals deconfliction in this case.
Deconfliction, yeah. And we put out a $500,000 reward, and it didn't occur to you to be like, hey guys, we don't want you to get some sort of erroneous allegations coming in because people are trying to get paid that sweet, sweet money. It was us the entire time. And again, no malice, no intent to deceive. It was just a good faith effort on our part to test our skills.
Baker?
Why do I think it was why do I think that Shauni Kirkoff and those counter surveillance officers thought it was a training exercise? Mm-hmm. It was the behavior and the response of the Secret Service agents that were notified at 1:05 p.m. on the day of January 6th that there was a suspicious device, a bomb, 10 feet from where they were seated having their lunch inside of a black SUV. And then they sat there and finished their lunch for 2.5 minutes before they then got out of the two SUVs and then wandered around haplessly, completely violating every aspect of their training as it relates to suspicious devices by not cordoning off the area, by not stopping foot traffic. There was family walking right by the bomb, not stopping automobile traffic that was only feet from the bomb. There was a train trestle 40 feet away, clearly within the training of the perimeter for that type of device should have been stopped as well. All of these things did not happen, and that's because I believe that the plainclothes officer from the Capitol Police walked up to the two SUVs and said, hey guys, don't mean to bother you here, but we're in the middle of a training exercise. We have this device over here. We're going to start the dog and pony show in a few minutes. The bomb squad's going to come out, and go ahead and finish your sandwich.
That's the hypothetical. Okay, can we do a kind of a fun game where we run through, and I want to see the inconsistencies in the story that lead us to believe that there was more government involvement than not, and that I think goes to why Brian Cole Jr. is a terrible subject to choose, since he had no interaction with government, and everybody who paid attention to the story for literally years, including the former co-deputy director of the FBI and the current director of the FBI, all agreed that this was some sort of federal involved story. Can I do a kind of sum up? Will you just give me like kind of check marks as I hit them, Steve?
Yeah.
Is it both Steves? Guys, help me remember if I miss something. Let's just put some footage of the hooded figure walking around on crappy video, not dropping a bomb and then dropping a bomb and then people responding in a weird way. Okay, so thing number one, the hooded figure sat at a bush that was outside the Congressional Black Caucus for 72 seconds or something to that effect, reached underneath it, went into a backpack, and then did not leave anything there, and then left the device over by the DNC. And the next day, U.S. Capitol Police counter surveillance guys drove to a metro station, went directly to that bush without stopping anywhere else, and then went directly to the bomb and found it in under 12 minutes, and then stopped looking for bombs after that. And there's no reason why we can find why they did that. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct. That is correct.
Okay, so that happens. About a week after January 6th, the FBI identified some persons of interest known as POI 1, POI 2, and POI 3. We were able to hunt down, you actually hunted down POI 2, but obviously the FBI did as well. They were able to ID POI 3 through a Metro card and through some sort of like credit card records and so on. And that allowed them to get to an address, and that address allowed them to dispatch a surveillance team of which I was a member of, and you have confirmed independently that I was there through people who were also there, through whistleblower testimony or disclosures. We were put outside of an address, and it turns out that address had POI 2, who's been picked up as a human being that travels all over the place and came in out of town kind of unusually. And so we know who those people were, and that turns out to be directly next door, several feet away from where Shauni Kirkoff's door was on January 12th and 13th. And then for no reason that anybody can assess, we were pulled off that surveillance, and the FBI never did surveillance about pipe bomb stuff, as far as I know, until October, November of 25. Is that what you know?
No, I want to insert one very interesting detail, but I think it's a very important detail, is that while, yes, I have personally confirmed through other sources that you, in fact, were on that SOG group, on the surveillance team, looking at this Falls Church, Virginia address, that the FBI, after our story was released November 8th, some individual, we know who it was, from the 7th floor of the Hoover building, was calling around to congressional members and the White House itself saying that Kyle Seraphin is lying, that he was never there on that surveillance team.
Did those calls stop after the next whistleblower came forward and validated?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, let me see some other things here. Is there a good reason, Steve Friend, that you can think of that the FBI would have a person of interest, not yet cleared through interviews or any sort of background investigation, have surveillance pulled from them when they were involved in dropping a pipe bomb? That's the case that it's about, that they may have been involved in dropping a pipe bomb in a major U.S. city. Can you imagine pulling surveillance from that?
No, I think you would probably keep eyes on them at all times.
Okay. Baker, as you understand the timeline, the surveillance team was put out there on January 12th, January 13th, then pulled off, and then they were cleared several days later per the Loudermilk report, which was like, I don't know, the 19th or something, or the 17th? You know,
they were not only do we have the Loudermilk report, which of course they got their information directly from the FBI, is that the interviews with both person of interest 2 and 3 took place on the 19th. So 6 days after you were pulled off of the surveillance of the potential bombers, the people, the weapons of mass destruction people, they yanked you guys away from there. And then these 2 individuals were not even interviewed or cleared by the FBI until the 19th. Now, I have sat down myself personally with person of interest number 2. I have interviewed him under on 2 different occasions, a total of 5 hours. I have screenshots from his own phone of the FBI texting him and calling him and saying, "Hey, we're downstairs at your apartment building right now. We want to interview." And the date on those screenshots is the 19th of January, 2021. They did not even reach out to him till the 6 days after you were pulled. And we have absolute evidence of that.
Friend, why would you pull surveillance if you haven't cleared somebody?
I'm struggling to come up with a benign and innocent reason. I think the only thing you could do assigned to it is administrative requirements. Like we only have a finite amount of surveillance and we have something that's more pressing than this, which again, I'd be hard pressed to find something more pressing when we look back to the historical record than finding the person that dropped pipe bombs in Washington, D.C.
Okay. Baker, do you have any good explanation for why that would happen? Nefarious or innocuous?
Yeah, I was pulling, deep dark web data on a particular individual who had become very curious and interesting to us by the name of Shauni Kirkoff. And one of the most interesting things that popped up in our background search on her was that she was a resident of the address directly connected and next door to the condo, which is the residence of person of interest number 3, and where person of interest number 2 had been visiting on the 5th and the 6th.
But that happened. So I sat there in January 12th, January 13th of 2021. There was zero connection that you and I, we didn't discuss where that was or why that would have mattered. And as far as I know, you didn't actually know that when you started figuring out who she was. Her address was one of the last things you saw, was it not?
I had no idea. In fact, we were already preparing the publication of our story, connecting who we believe to be, a prime suspect. We're making no 100% allegations that Shauni Kirkoff is 100% the bomber. But the bottom line is that from the evidence that we had been able to pull up about her, that we were preparing the story, and on the morning, 24 hours before the release of our story, I remembered that you in an interview you had given, I can't remember whether it was in 2003 or 2004, and I can't remember the publication that it may have been Daily Wire.
Daily Wire, probably 24.
You had given an interview where you had indicated that where you guys would meet on those 2 mornings before you posted up the surveillance at the home of person of interest number 3 is that you would meet at a fire station.
Mm-hmm.
Now think about how this stuff comes together. These are the kinds of things when you just pull on little threads as an investigator over a long period of time, suddenly connections start being made. And what happened is I remembered a 2.5-year-old interview that you had done where you had said that there was a fire station nearby the address. And so now we had the address of Shauni Kirkoff, right? So I went to Google Maps and I found a fire station, I think as the crow flies, 0.4 miles from that address. So I called Kyle up and I said, Kyle, you remember the story, blah, blah, blah? He said, yeah, of course. I said, do you remember the address that you were looking at? You gave me the address. I gave you Shauni Kirkoff's address, and you lost your mind on the phone right then.
That's actually true.
Expletives flying because you instantly recognize it as next door neighbor.
Here's the line that you recalled from the article. This article comes from Luke Rosiak, 2024. It's January 24. It's right there. Seraphin, who led the FBI surveillance team, told the Daily Wire that shortly after January 6, a counterintelligence team met him at Firehouse in Falls Church, Virginia, to brief him on his next surveillance target. They used security footage to follow the person into a metro station after he planted the pipe bombs, identified the fare card that was used. And that's close to what happened. Yeah, they followed somebody who obviously was at the locations where the pipe bombs were planted, but they got it pretty close. So there you go.
Yeah. And so I had a memory of this.
I said the same thing behind the paywall to Kerry Pickett in 2023. So just as we're continuing on, I'll pull that up in a second just for fun.
So I had the memory of that interview. You had the memory of the address itself. And when I compared with you the address I had of one Shauni Kirkoff and you the address of POI number 3, person of interest number 3, you immediately recognized them as next door neighbors. And now let's go back to Thomas Massey's finding the laws of probability, or finding, the mathematics of probabilities more interesting than statistics. Now we have the most insane improbability of the entire pipe bomb story is out of 2.4 million individual households in the greater DC area. Concentrate on that, everybody. 2.4 million individual households in the greater DC area that POI 2, POI 3, and Shauni Kirkoff, who has a 94 to 98% forensic gate recognition match to the hooded bomber, are next door neighbors.
Trillions to one.
Immeasurable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we did the math on it for two like completely unrelated chances. If you just were to randomly pick them out of a hat, it's like 6.1 trillion to one or something crazy. And maybe even worse.
Yeah. And this, Kyle, Steve, it still remains a mystery to a certain extent. Now we have look, Joe and I, when we were ordered by the Blaze to stop investigating Shauni Kirkoff by the Blaze attorneys, all right, I can talk now. I'm no longer under that gag order. Mm-hmm. But we were specifically told we could no longer investigate Shauni Kirkoff because if we continued to even investigate her, it would be construed as malice in the event of a coming lawsuit. Is that by that continuation of that? I did not stop. So I told my editor-in-chief, I told him, I'm not stopping. I'm not speaking for Joe. I'm not stopping. I think it's an absurd a requirement from the attorneys for the two people who know the most about the January 6th pipe bomb of anybody else other than the intelligence community itself and the people who planned it, the people who made the bombs and planted the bombs. Joe and I know more about it than anybody else on the planet. And you're going to pull us off the investigation in the event of a defamation suit? Don't you want your best people on that task to exonerate the company, to exonerate your journalists? And even though we were told, we did not stop. And so one of the things that we continue to investigate are the connections involved with those two addresses, and that is a story yet to be told, but it's coming.
All right, so we're gonna double back and restate, and friend, fill in if I forget something here that I just said. But we had an event take place. We saw immediately afterwards that there was a response by law enforcement to find out who the person was. We saw that on the day of, law enforcement mimicked the steps and followed the exact locations and then gave up immediately afterwards the locations the bomber had gone on the night before, which at the very minimum would indicate they had some familiarity with what the bomber had done. If there was time, we would say, well, they probably just reviewed the security cam footage and saw where the hoodie went. But that wasn't the case. They didn't have that time. That radio call did not go out. There were bomb squads that were dispatched, so there were resources that were assigned to it. It seemed like it was a big deal the first time. The second one got a much more lackadaisical response, and that also is illogical. The FBI deployed surveillance teams and then illogically pulled them off, which is something I said starting in 2023 to the media when I became a public figure of whatever. Same thing in 2024. My story's been not changed at all. The FBI apparently made an effort to say that I was saying things that were false until we were able to validate those things, because shockingly, the FBI actually has records, and there are some people of scruples that work in the Bureau that took that to Congress and said, don't do it. By the way, the whistleblower that went to Congress, we found out from Thomas Massie, had also been threatened that there was an ongoing potential to sniff them out of Washington Field. And so there was some sort of a meeting that Dan Bongino threatened to do, and then he had to backtrack on because social media got a hold of it and found out they were going to do a mole hunt instead of a whistleblower, celebration that somebody was bringing up good information on this. You guys do a good faith information dig. You bring it to members of the intelligence community. They did their own substantiation, we have to assume, because you didn't go out there and say what they could or couldn't do, and you don't command the federal government, I don't think, Mr. Baker.
No, no. Odie and I and FBI, CIA, they all answer to me.
Okay, so that's what I meant to say. Interestingly enough, we also have to throw in the background that the FBI had already decided to exclude law enforcement phone numbers, and we don't know that they ever added them back into their search. But theoretically, there are 51 phone numbers or devices that were attributed to law enforcement, likely FirstNet, which is a law enforcement service, that were excluded from the search because they were trying to focus resources. Then they did this massive exhaustive search for all kinds of things and came up with, apparently, only after you brought something forward, a guy who looked at the anarchist cookbook when he was 16 years old and then had the premonition several years prior that he was going to be upset about the election results that hadn't yet happened because the people hadn't even announced that they were going to run. And when he got upset about that, he decided to build pipe bombs from memory from the thing that he had researched a decade prior. And of course, then he got rid of all the things that were part of the pipe bomb because he saw his face on camera and he knew that he was the guy. But then he went out and bought more pipe bomb components for a long period of time afterwards. And after 18 months of buying additional pipe bomb stuff, then he got weirdly panicky and then started doing an OCD thing where he wiped his phone, but it had no connection to the actual event thereof. And also, by the way, the person that you identified as a 94 to 98% match with the pipe bomb also failed a polygraph about that said thing and then got to go back at the work, to work at the CIA. What other things am I missing here on the sort of weird pieces that get conveniently forgotten where it's only gate analysis is what got you there?
You're missing the part where all of that has been debunked.
Right. Okay. But it's been debunked by a puppies video that no one has ever seen, but 3 sources from the FBI confirmed that there were puppies being played with. And then we find out after a couple of iterations that it's actually a video of a dog with no people in it whatsoever, but the dog's neck vein is throbbing and someone is talking about it off camera, allegedly Shauni Kirkoff, as validated by a lawsuit suing you for defamation and malice.
Let me just point this out. We mentioned earlier that I was on my hands and knees with a tape measure, measuring bricks, measuring concrete blocks. What we discovered is simple math, that the pipe bomber, the gray hooded figure that made that 45-minute trek through the Capitol that night to place 2 devices behind the RNC and the DNC, has a shoe size of between a 9 and a 9.5. Now, my partner Joe likes for me to say that it could possibly be a 10, but I'm pretty sure from my measurements, because I did them myself, that it's between a 9 and a 9.5. Wearing the shoe is a Nike Air Max Speed Turf 2018 model, special edition, limited edition shoe. So I know the size of that shoe. We have also measured Brian Cole Jr.'s shoes at the location of where he had the fender bender in 2004 from police body cam. We know that his foot size is between a 12 and a 12.5. We know that beyond any shadow of a doubt. This young autistic man did not shove his size 12 feet into a size 9 shoe or size 12.5 into a 9.5 and traverse around the Capitol for an hour. Autistic, highly OCD individuals of his type, borderline Rain Man, 5 minutes to Wapner, as is told to us by his neighbors, family, other people who have witnessed him in real life for a decade and how he behaves. There's no way that guy shoves his size 12 foot into a 9 shoe.
Not to scoop your... Yeah, and not to scoop the story because we won't. There's more things that are inconsistent, that are consistent with not Brian Cole Jr. And maybe with the alternative. This could involve like technologies. This could involve like way that people present in public. This is not the entirety of it that it's hinging on the way that somebody walks. But I did want to go through the debunk if you're okay. Feel free to add anything else. And we're going to hit the debunking because there's like 4 claims that are made in the lawsuit that they claim are already debunked. And some of them are objectively false, which I will show video if we want. I mean, it's pretty easy to do, especially the limp bit that they like to go on.
How about the physical description or aside, how about a gate analysis of Brian Cole Jr.? I mean, has that put him anywhere close to a 94 to 98% match? How about Brian Cole Jr. was somehow in his diminished mental capacity able to elude an $11 billion law enforcement agency for half a decade, having allegedly used his own cell phone and credit card
and driven his own vehicle and taken no special precautions to avoid, just lived his life as normal. And by living his life as normal, this $11 billion a year investigative agency was unable to come up with anything. He was a complete Jason Bourne right up until the fact that Steve Baker identifies someone. Listen, the circumstances of this, if it was 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 of these things, there's like 11 to 15 of them. And every time that we can remember more of how ridiculous the claims were, from the people that were looking at it from the outside originally, to every logical mind that presents it after the fact, to the fact that like it it doesn't add up that a guy who probably he walks the same route every single day in his neighborhood because he knows that route. He doesn't go drive into Washington, D.C., not use his cell phone, and then wander around directly avoiding Capitol Police cameras, going through secret doors that you have no way of knowing exist because I've looked at the same map and I don't see a door there, and I'm really good at doing map recon. I literally did it for a living for 3 years. There's just no way that man goes in and does those things. And then, of course, there's some technology that's going to be really problematic for people. Because even at the very minimum, we can do the video of his likely vehicle driving. There's no way you get a conviction with just what we'll put on the screen right now. You do not convict this man in Washington, D.C., because we're talking about a black, slightly disabled man working as a high-functioning autistic person. A D.C. jury does not look at that. A jury of leftist Democrats who overwhelmingly convicted people for January 6th don't look at a black guy that has nothing to do with anything January 6th related in a household full of nice people, but Democrats. That's their people. You're not going to see a Washington, D.C. jury convict this guy. Do you think there's any chance that a D.C. jury that would have judged you, Mr. Baker, would have gone like, oh, yeah, obviously it's Brian Cole Jr. We got to knock that guy out of the park? Like, does that happen?
I answered that question by giving one particular answer every single time, and it stops the naysayers, and I'm talking about MSM journalist colleagues, stops them dead in their tracks. When I say this is the answer to your question. How many Oath Keepers were fully acquitted of their January 6th crimes? There were two. Two Oath Keepers were acquitted.
Okay.
Put their photos side by side, and they have one interesting characteristic that's different than all of the other convicted Oath Keepers. Those two men were black. Period.
Good.
The two black
I'm trying to
Oath
see if there's a
Keepers
picture of it on
charged
Jury
with
of your
the
peers,
same
I
thing.
guess.
The two black Oath Keepers charged with the same crimes as the white Oath Keepers were acquitted, and all of the whites were convicted.
That's pretty telling. It's pretty telling in Washington, D.C., is it not? What are we seeing on the screen here, this looped video? You want to just tell people why this is exculpatory in and of itself? For reasonable doubt. For reasonable doubt.
So in terms of reasonable doubt, our video expert that's on our team, the guy mysteriously known only as Armitage online, he has been able to identify during the specified times on the evening of January 5th, 3 of those cars right there. That's a 2017 Nissan Sentra. The advantage that we have over just Capitol CCTV video and traffic cameras, as you're seeing here, is that we have the exact VIN number of Brian Cole's car, the actual car he drove. So by virtue of the VIN number, we know the exact trim package of that 2017 model Nissan, including the wheel covers, which were one of 17 different wheel options offered by the manufacturer in that year model for that car. We found 2 other 2017 Nissan Sentras in the area that do not match the trim package. They were different. That means lighting, fog lighting, anything to do with the exterior trim of the car. In fact, one of the cars, we were able to get a clear enough shot of the car that we could see 2 white people, there they are, sitting in the front seat of the car. Steve. What's that?
I'm really good at this.
You did great. Timing was perfect. It's almost like we rehearsed it in a real big time for real news program.
We did not, so, but I'm able to see.
Right.
Yeah, it looks like there's 2 white ladies driving this car.
But we did find the Nissan Sentra that has the exact match to the trim package, matching that VIN number of his car. But the inconvenient reality is that car is driving directly into the cell tower where the FBI reports the ping. There you go.
Let me pause this real quick.
You really are good. You really are good.
Okay, so here's what you're seeing on the screen, folks. If you guys are listening, you're missing out on the video, which we've done a number of times, but I want to break it down again for anybody who's new to this. This, I think, is really, really telling, okay? The arrow, which is right in the middle next to the number 1 and those red lines, that arrow is where the car is. And the car is driving up to a point where you see a star in a circle that says 80419. That's where a ping happens. And that is where Brian Cole Jr.'s car was in the videos that we just showed Loop, which I'm going to show you again in a second. The tower that he's supposedly pinging on during that time is the number 3. It's at the top and center. It's tower number 147990. And it roughly encompasses a capture area of those orange arms, which are an angle split, not the larger part of the angle, but the smaller one that's like roughly 80 or 90, maybe 100 degrees. So as he is being picked up by the tower, the government's case indicates that he's actually not hanging out there, driving directly at the tower, right in the center of the main collection point of that tower's, data grab, but in fact is actually on the fringes over by the number 3 on the far right-hand side of this diagram, that he's somewhere on the route and he's in between video cameras, off camera, and grabbing a new bomb from his car, which is parked over by Folger and Providence Park there, if my memory serves. So that's the claim, that he's off camera, slightly outside of the realm of the tower's pickup, when in reality we can see that there's a car that matches exactly Brian Cole Jr.'s vehicle that is driving directly at the tower, and the most likely explanation is that you are going to have somebody who is in the heart of the collection zone driving directly at the tower in a car that looks just like his, which there are already 2 others and they've all been eliminated, instead of off camera, hidden somewhere outside the collection radius of that tower, and we're supposed to make that work. And it turns out that there are multiple instances, including on ping number 1, he's inside ping number 2, he's not inside ping number 3, and he's inside ping number 4 barely. But essentially, the government's case hinges on that the fringe margins plus or minus some percentage gathered him on foot, when in likelihood he was actually driving right in the heart of all of these collection zones, and his car, which is followed through, is actually easily collected in all those areas. And the route of the car is essentially where you see that white arrow. It drives up to where that point is that has the sort of circle up to C Street, just below the number 3. Then it turns on to 395, that sort of messy spaghetti complex of freeway things. And it would take him at least 8 minutes from the time that he was picked up on camera, we believe he was picked up on camera, to get even over to where Folger Park is. And in that time, the pipe bomber's already reappeared from the shadows and is walking around on foot. So from the argument of the video that is being presented in this particular podcast, we've done it a few times others, we're saying that the alibi, or even just let's call it the reasonable doubt that you could introduce to a DC jury, is that he was driving and he could have no way, shape, or form been on foot, regardless of what you want to claim. And the cell phone data would back that up, because you're basically looking at interpretation. They don't have video of his face. They don't have video of him taking off the hood. They don't have video of his car. They don't have video of him getting into or out of that car, at least that we've ever been seen. And they haven't made any arguments about it in court. You're talking about they're circumstantially placing a cell phone, which could have a perfectly logical excuse that he's on in a vehicle. And they're claiming that because they need him to be on that route, he must be on that route because he also happened to own some things that are also in my garage. And he bought them at random times over the last several years because he clearly wanted to bomb something that didn't happen yet. That's the argument for the government's case is so incredibly weak, in my opinion. And I cannot believe that somebody wants to back it up. Maybe Steve Friend, you weigh in, and then we'll go.
I want to real quickly before Steve jumps in here, reemphasize just 2 quick points you made. Number 1, we have done the work. I know you did it as well, Kyle. Is that when this car, the location of the car that matches Brian Cole's car, pings on that tower, Google Maps says it's a 7 to 8 minute drive to where the bomber was on foot at that very moment. Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. They cannot be in the same place at the same time, and it's a physical, unless they're using Star Trek transporter technology in order for Brian Cole to be the bomber. Okay.
Yes.
Or the driver of that car anyway. So, but we also, the second most important point, and you did mention it, I just want to reemphasize it, is that car, we tracked the car turning onto the entrance ramp to I-395, which then takes that car back to Virginia, where Brian Cole resides.
Yeah. Go ahead, Steve, friend.
Well, the question being, why would they go along with this when all of this evidence that has presented here today is to the contrary. I think actually it was in the transcript. I don't know if you still have it at your fingertips. The transcripts with Thomas Massey and Stephen D'Antuono. Something there that jumped out to me that D'Antuono was saying, and it's a repeated refrain that we've heard from multiple peoples, and I always harken back to the Marilyn Melky reference of, can you think what you're saying, Kyle Seraphin, right now? It might be true, but if it should ever find its way into the hands of one of our enemies, the damage that it would do to the institutions would be far in excess of what you're alleging right now. Because think of all the good work that we do right now that would be ruined if the evils that went on here were to come to any sort of realization from people. And D'Antuono was far less artful than that in his explanation. But I think that that's the conclusion that was ultimately.
Yeah, I've got the testimony up. There's a couple little bits in here. Massey says, "Are you aware former FBI agent Kyle Seraphin? He talked with technicians in his office, said they were not viable. They couldn't or would not have exploded." D'Antuono says, this is just one of my favorite little parts in here. He says, "I've seen the report from Mr. Seraphin. I'm not going to discount Kyle's view. That's his view wherever he sits and the people he's talked to. I don't know who he's talked to. All I know is that we at the Washington field office received a report from the lab division, which are the bomb experts. And I don't know what Kyle's expertise in bomb making is, that they were viable devices. Well, my expertise in bomb making is significantly higher than an accountant who no longer can get accounting accounts because he was an FBI agent and is basically useless. I've got 100 hours or so of on-the-job training in demolition to include C4, military demolition, dynamite, etc. I've done electric and non-electric blasts and so on. I spent 2 weeks on the range out at Fort Bragg or whatever it is, Camp McCall. So I have some experience. I've done improvised explosives and so on. I have a lot more experience than Steve D'Antuono does. And also, I had someone come and tell me that they weren't bombs, that they were like inert and that they looked very bomb-like on the day that we were out there looking for officer safety. So that was kind of interesting. I'm trying to see if there's if you remember the keyword that
God no. It's when he said God no.
God no.
Key search it. But I think that
okay, God no. Okay, so could there have been here you go. Would the FBI's handling of case been any different if you've been investigating a plot to kidnap or okay?
No, that's I guess he must like that phrase.
He likes that phrase. Here's the other one. Oh God, no, I would never do that. Yeah, misinformation. These comments are dangerous. Yeah, those are dangerous comments to be had because you can't claim the FBI would do something out of bad faith.
Yes.
Because that would make our enemies strong.
We would lose the narrative that we're an objective force for good here, especially when we have our guys in this FBI in charge. And I think that meetings were had on the 7th floor with the principals and the leadership structure of the FBI that said, you can't let the Reichstag fire that likely was this pipe bomb get out into the public. We have to just go along with it, because of all the good work that we're going to do outside of this context will be negated because the calls inevitably will be for dissolving this entire apparatus as it is constituted right now. And think of all the real bombs and real attacks that might happen if we're not standing the watch as the sentries that we represent ourselves to be at all times. Because every time you come in, Co-Deputy Director Daniel Bongino, there's 100 level 10 things on your desk, and we won't be able to address those because we're going to be so mired and distracted by how we were the cleanup crew for a U.S. Capitol Police officer going out under perhaps good faith, thinking that she was engaged in a training exercise, and then that wound up spinning out of control, and it actually pulls in all these different agencies and apparatchiks within the government that includes the Capitol Police and the ATF and ODNI and the Department of Justice and the FBI and now the CIA. And the only logical conclusion that anybody who is fair-minded, who is not going to be weighed by the politics one way or another is, oh, you all did that? You all got to go now.
Fair conclusion. Baker, we'll do any thoughts on that, and then we'll do a real quick thing running through the debunking that was done in the lawsuit, which I guess was sort of like a precursor to the New York Times article debunking you. And then we'll wrap this thing up because we've been going for quite a while. But I do think that all this, if you've never heard anything about the pipe bomb before, or you don't understand what the argument is, this would be a pretty solid primer to get you on pace with what's out there, and then also kind of tune people to coming in and following your reporting, because there's obviously more to come. I know what it is, but I'm not going to say it, and you're not ready to write that story, but I imagine it's coming.
Let's do a lightning round on the debunking.
Okay. One last little thing, which I think is very interesting. It's been multiply alleged that I was somehow a central source for you. Okay.
Right.
That was alleged in a lawsuit. It was alleged in some threatening letters that we got as well. And I was hearing in real time while you guys were doing this story. And so I was not surprised by it, although I thought it was very interesting. The crazy bit was your management at Blaze, when you were working there, was getting chirps in their ear, not just like, hey, Kyle Seraphin wasn't there and he's lying about this. They were troubleshit because it was this last minute moment. I'm just remembering now. It was going to drop on like a Thursday and then it got pushed from Friday. Oh yeah, that's a reason to drop Steve Baker off. That's pretty good. Yeah,
I'm back.
Clicked out for a second. Can we still hear you?
Yeah. I finished the question.
I can't hear him.
Though.
Hold on.
I didn't
Hold
hear
on
it.
a second. Your audio's gone.
I hear him.
Can you hear him?
I do.
Check.
We
Am I there?
almost
Yeah.
made it through the entire thing.
Dude, Steve and I, a friend and I had a bet that there was 100% chance that you would have some sort of weird glitch or audio. So there it is.
I
So
should
now
have
we're
put the
both.
odds on Polymarket. Dang
Okay.
it.
So
Finish what you were saying because I lost that last part.
Here's what's weird. You were going to drop the story on like maybe a Thursday, so it would be first thing on a Friday morning. Then it moved to Friday night. It ended up dropping, I think, in the middle of the night on either Friday night or Saturday morning or something. Am I
Saturday
remembering?
morning, right?
Okay, so it got dropped at a disadvantageous time, and that was kind of weird. But a big piece of it is last second, your guys got cold feet. It'd gone through editorial review, it'd gone through legal review, multiple phases of each. Your management, senior management had gotten in. Then it sounds like they got a phone call from DC, from the FBI offices saying, Seraphin was kind of the cream on the icing on the cake, which was like, hey, by the way, also it was right next door to where I was 5 years earlier. Right. And so that was kind of like an oh shit moment for all of us. And when that happened, then that got the immediate pushback. Hey, that's not true. And although that had nothing to do with the nuts and bolts of the story or the skeleton that you guys had built up, it was something that made them have pause because now they were saying, hey, Seraphin wasn't even there. And then we were able to substantiate that for you in last minute. Like basically you got Tom Massey to come into the rescue with some information you didn't previously had. Right. What did that do to your management? What was the climate when that happened is what I wanted to hear.
The climate was rapid fear. I mean, it was, let me just back it up.
Yeah,
so we released the story early in the morning on the 8th.
Tell the story. There we go.
And then, are we doing the echo thing? Are we okay audio wise?
No, we're good. I was talking over you, but yeah, tell the story as I was kind of just summarizing it. Tell the real version of that because I think that's the last little piece that people should hear.
Yeah, and I'm going to back it up. Is that within 12 hours of our story being published early in the morning on November 8th, our company, the what we call the C-suite or the executive suite at the company, were in absolute panic because they were getting calls from all over the spectrum from attorneys, from other media people that they have relationship with, probably from the FBI, whatever. They were being told that they were going to be existentially put out of existence by a defamation lawsuit. And so everything went into lockdown. But as you properly pointed out, this was prepared to be released days before. We teased the story on the Glenn Beck show Wednesday of that week. On Saturday, the Saturday before, we know that Kash Patel called Glenn Beck to try to stop this story from coming out. They were already in cleanup mode at the time, doing everything they could to keep this from getting out. And but as it specifically relates to you, the calls were already coming in, and we knew that they were being put out there, not only from Kash Patel, but also from our senior leadership at the Blaze had received phone calls from Ben Williamson, the public affairs official at the FBI. They'd received calls from Marshall Yates, at the time, the congressional liaison to the FBI, and then, of course, 2 specific calls that I'm aware of from Dan Bongino himself to the senior leadership at the Blaze to interdict and to stop my reporting. So these were known things that were taking place, and intertwined in that were the lies about you. And one of the 2 most persistent lies that keep coming back, including in this lawsuit, is that you were a primary source to this story about Shauni Kirkoff. All right, that's the first one. The second one is that Odie and I, specifically even Joe Kent at NCTC, gave me the name Shauni Kirkoff, neither of which are true. I brought you that name, and I brought you the address where she lived. What you contributed to the narrative was your whole oh shit moment She lived right next door to where we had our surveillance set up on January 12th and 13th. The other contributing factor that you've given to the narrative was, of course, that you were told by your leadership or by your command at the FBI that the bombs were inert. They were not viable devices. Okay? So there's your contribution to the story. Your factual, truthful, in total contribution to this story. And for them to insinuate otherwise or to conflate it any more than that is absolutely untrue. For them to insinuate and conflate in any way, shape, or form that Odie and I, Joe Kent, or Tulsi Gabbard were the ones that gave me this information. In fact, Tulsi Gabbard's Directors Initiative Group, the DIG, was specifically reported by mainstream media as being shut down because they named the wrong person as the bomber. Untrue. Total lie.
Can I proffer something that I don't know why it's just occurring to me, as far as the level of buy-in that you got from Kash Patel and Daniel Bongino as it relates to Brian Cole has to be the guy and it cannot possibly be Shauni Kirkoff. I mean, I think that their emotional intelligence is far on the left side of the bell curve. Their EQ, for lack of a better term, is really, really in the double digits. Could it entirely be that the people who's made it their full-time job to bubble wrap and insulate and manipulate the director and the co-deputy director of the FBI at all times could have just gone to them and said, you know that Seraphin is saying that it's Shauni Kirkoff, and then that was like waving the red flag in front of the bull like a matador, and then they immediately defaulted to whatever the manipulators wanted them to? Just because they hate you so much?
Kyle?
Yeah, it's plausible. I mean,
medium level confidence.
Yeah, I trigger people. Do you guys want to hear some funny things from a mutual friend, journalist? Do you want to hear what Trevor Aronson's been working on the last 2 days?
Oh, he just sent it to me.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys want to see this?
Uh-oh.
I already knew about this, by the way. I knew about this before he reported on it. But FBI Director Kash Patel just disclosed in a 2005 letter that he'd been arrested for public urination. He also described a public intoxication arrest in 2001. I've seen it. Apparently, he was part of the Richmond Rowdies, which was a college group. He was 20 years old, and he got into like a yelling match and got arrested for a public intox while he was underage. So he's got 2 documented legal arrests over alcohol over a period of 4 years, going back obviously like 20 something years ago at this point. But this is not the first time that he's ever had alcohol implications. Here's the difference between what grownups do, guys who go out and get married and have babies and start productive lives and do like real things with their life, or the difference between people who live as Peter Pan forever and then want to have a girl who is their friend that's 19 years younger. Not that anyone's mad about having younger women in their life, I'm sure, but at the end of the day, it does lean you towards a specific maturity level. And I remember talking to Kash Patel in Vegas where he was complaining that all the women in Las Vegas were hookers. And I was like, you live in fucking Las Vegas, dude. Like, what's the surprise about that? If you are getting arrested in 2001 and then in 2005 over booze, and then you don't change your life dramatically, except you just get more money, then you just are able to spend $20,000 a year for a membership so you can drink it private where there's no cameras and stuff, which is a smart thing to do if you're a millionaire. But it doesn't mean that you've grown up out of it or that you're no longer a problem with alcohol, which may be a real thing if that goes on. So anyway, it's just kind of funny that like all this stuff is going to spill out. By the way, other reporters knew about this for a while. I saw his arrest report pop up on Twitter a couple days ago when they were talking about the Atlantic story. The stories are going to waterfall out. All of the implications of it are going to continue to waterfall out. And I think also, whether they meant it to be or not, if he still is around when Brian Cole Jr. is acquitted, I think that will be the coup de grace that this guy really blew it, because they consider this to be a marquee case for themselves, and that's just pathetic.
Right.
How long is the girl who's his friend going to remain his friend? One, if he loses that sweet, sweet jet. And two, if she is able to do basic math and realize that he paid the same law firm to sue on his behalf for $250 million and for her for $5 million. Ergo, he views himself as 50 times more important than her.
I'll leave that to Steve Baker, who has more experience with women and life than both of us. Go ahead, my friend.
That's only by virtue of the number of years I've been on this planet.
That's all it is.
Being the elder statesman in this panel right now. But
Yes,
okay, go back to the college era, 20-year-old Kash Patel, public drunkenness, whatever. I don't care. even people I don't like, whether it's Patel or George Bush and his DUI and all those kind of things. I don't care about that kind of stuff. Look. I'm about to be. I'm going to give my age away here specifically, but just in what is it? Today's in 3 days. I'm going to be 66 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had a DUI. I've never been arrested for public intoxication.
Mm-hmm.
I never. In fact, when I was in college, I didn't drink at all.
You are a misdemeanor terrorist, though.
I am a misdemeanor terrorist. I do have that on my record. And so, but the point being is that even somebody like me with no record whatsoever, I'm accused every single day of being an alcoholic by actual alcoholics online because I am. And,
I know you are. I've seen it.
And the reason for that is that I have a particular aficionado kind of attraction to high-end cigars and really great scotch. And so I'll take photos like that. So then they'll say, he's an alcoholic. You never see him without a drink in his hand. Well, no, 99.99% of the time you see me without a drink in my hand. But if I'm out with, friends or whatever, and we're pouring, an expensive scotch and celebrating over a victory of some sort, then I'll post that on social media.
I'm aware. I've been party to dinners where you've engaged in a drink, and then you said I have other things to do today, though. So this is it for tonight. It's very funny. I'm sure Kash Patel doesn't just get blackout drunk all the time either. I don't think he's like a non-functional human being. But he clearly has made some weird choices. There's another story that maybe I'll cover on Monday that was really funny, talking about how he's been a locker room, jock strap sniffer for his whole life, and that he used to get super excited and starstruck by stars of every sport. And he was part of an athletic spirit group when he was in college, where he got arrested for doing screaming and pissing in public or whatever. It's just like all this stuff is kind of funny. You start reading some of it, and you're like, okay, yeah, look, you're kind of a boy. You're not really acting like a man. Maybe that's what's going on here. When he starts defending himself, he looks like a fool. But I do think that at the end of the day, this pipe bomber thing, which they've all kind of hung their hat on, and Janine Pirro's in the same category. Bondi's out. Bongino's out. There were two people at that press conference that are left that anybody will care about with any name. And I think that they get sunk. And I'm not saying that because I'm cheering it on. I'm saying when you go after somebody with such an awful case that so clearly looks like they misled you, handled you, and brought you some garbage, to the point where, gentlemen, I have it on very good authority, and I'm very comfortable saying Dan Bongino had no idea. Daniel was not aware that they interviewed Shauni Kirkoff and that she failed a polygraph. They didn't even present that to him. And why would they? I mean, I've said it previously, but like, if I was going to go handle him and I would be like, hey, there's this woman, she didn't do it because we need to make sure that we protect her because she did something for us and we're not talking about that and you're not read in on it, but she didn't do it. And by the way, we're going to go out there and clear her. And then he goes and starts talking to Massey. Yeah, we're going to clear her. You guys are a bunch of a-holes. Meanwhile, nobody said, by the way, she failed her polygraph when asked specifically these questions, which will totally be used in exculpatory when they go out there and they start presenting the case of alternate theory, which his attorneys are going to, Brian Cole Jr.'s attorneys are totally going to do. They've already told you what they're going to do.
Yeah. And let me point out.
By the way, Daniel, Seraphin thinks that she did it.
Yeah, by the way, Seraphin is waved the flag at him. Go ahead, Baker.
Let me point out something else real quick, Kyle, along that line. You realize that the three sources who confirmed to CBS that she was on video playing with her puppies, plural, on the evening of January 5th during the time the bombs were being planted. These same three sources would also have known from that investigation that she had failed her polygraph. Why did they only give the CBS News that one piece of information and not the other piece of information at the same time? It's because they are deliberately trying to shape a narrative, which means there's something to cover up.
Yeah, which everybody agreed on before those guys got into those positions and changed their mind about it. All right, I think, did I miss anything that you want to cover, Steve? I'll give each of you guys kind of a parting shot. Baker first. Anything that we did not cover that you'd like to talk about?
No, I don't think so. I would just reemphasize the point that at some point here, Joe and I are going to swing our guns over to the media coverage of this itself. I mean, this was a big part of my coverage of back in the Oath Keepers trial. It was just as revelatory the way the media reported that trial as the trial itself, and how the government manipulated data, evidence, withheld evidence, with multiple Brady violations in that trial. But then to watch how the media purposefully participated in putting forward to the American people the false narrative, and that's exactly what we're seeing a repeat of here in this case.
I think you're right. Plug your socials, plug your website. I'll put the Good Some Go down if people want to support you financially and get your project off the ground as you're being sued over it. So anyway, I put the last story you guys have up.
Yeah, it's look, just go to X. That's where I do most of my daily posting, at Steve Baker USA. The rest, everything else about me and where I'm at, you can find from there, including Joe and I's new venture, which is the Veritas Regnat project website, veritasregnat.com. The link's right at the top of my X page. And then also we do have a Give, Send, Go up right now, because we anticipate it's going to be about a year before we just finish this story alone. And it's not the only thing we work on. We're not one-note wonders. January 6th, or the pipe bomb, is not the only story we cover. We cover lots of other things in our lives. But we're pretty focused on this right now because of the importance of where it is in the national conversation. And getting the truth out is a priority for us. And so this fundraising thing is to do nothing really but raise enough money for Joe and I to survive for a year, to pay for professional legal fees and our health insurance coverage. That's it. We're not trying to make any money or get rich off of this, and we won't, by the way.
Yeah, that checks. All right, so there you go. That's that. Steve, friend, any parting shots, and plug whatever you'd like to as well.
Sure. Well, I think it can't be lost on this entire conversation that there's presently an innocent man sitting in a cage right now. And it's the fault of this government, which has access to the three dudes that are sitting on the screen right now. At any point, we were available for tasking, available to be resources of information, particularly Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman, who's not on the screen with us. They've been reporting on this for a while, and they made themselves available for this information. And yet it didn't comport with the narrative for whatever reason. And now there's a guy right now, presently sitting in isolation. And I can only presume it's in hope that he suicides himself. And those who put him there deserve to be in yellow jumpsuits at the end of an L-shaped hallway for the rest of their lives, because they looked at their opportunity to serve within government and swear an oath, and as an opportunity rather than to protect their fellow citizen against fraud and force, but to elevate themselves, boost their social media follower account, personally enrich themselves, fly around on jets, whatever the motivation was. And that's wholly unacceptable. As far as promoting myself, at Real Steve Friend. You see me here every Friendly Friday. And then the American Radicals podcast. You can find it on Rumble, YouTube, at AmRadPod, also over at Spotify. The Friday show I pre-taped in preparation for our long-form conversation. So it's going on right now, but you can catch it on the replay. We're talking about a couple of resignations and suspensions within the administration. And also the Sharks are high on cocaine. So it's a fun Friday.
What? Are there sharks on cocaine?
Sure are, my friend.
There's cocaine bears and cocaine sharks.
Mm-hmm.
This is the worst timeline. I hate 2026. I don't want to be here anymore. Okay. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining me for this panel. I appreciated the insights. I hope that was fun for people who are listening. I will put some resources in the comments, and follow my friends who are also my guests, who also are people who have great information. So there it is. Gentlemen, have a lovely weekend. I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
Adios, boys. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being part of the program. You guys make this real. Make sure you hit a like on Rumble if you're still watching, which I hope you are, or I hope you come back to it. And I watched it in 2 parts. That's okay, too, with a fresh mind. Do the same thing over on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel as we move our way up there organically without paying anybody to promote us. That's not what I do. I just see if people like what we're doing, and it turns out that some of you guys do. Make sure you're subscribed over there. If you want to become a member of the YouTube channel, if you want to subscribe to Locals at kyleseraphin.com, it's $5 a month. I think there's an annual that's slightly cheaper. And you guys can also be part of our call-in show, which will happen tonight at 8 p.m. I will be your Friday night date, if you are so inclined. If you have nobody else in your life, I'll be there on this Friday, and we can talk about all this stuff that you just heard or anything else that's particularly interesting. You can tell me about when you got arrested for pissing on a cop car or whatever fun things you guys did if you have a public intox in your life, and when you grew up, or maybe you didn't. So we could do all that kind of stuff. The call-in number is only available to people who are subscribers that support this channel. It's kind of the way that we do this thing. I hated the idea of saying, hey, why don't you give me money to support what I'm doing? And also, there's no special privilege. So that's the special privilege. Appreciate you guys. See you at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, whatever time that is on the other time zones that are before me that I do not know. And I really appreciate all of you guys being part of these long interviews. I think they add some value. And I know that we'll be seeing some of our friends from the legal community not liking what we had to say here today. Should we do, I feel like I should do a palate cleanse, but I'm not sure I have one. So I'll owe you one. Watch tonight and I'll have some extra ones. God bless you. See you on the other end here. I got to find the button. There it is.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.